considering we have a new council member, a couple of new council members since then. I'm bringing it forward about having a joint meeting with our school board representatives. We have, this really came in light because of what we learned at National League of Cities in regard to funding available. There's lots that we can discuss with our board representatives. So I would like to make a motion to bring up before the end of the school year, so sometime between now and mid-May, to have a joint board and council meeting.
Second. That has been seconded twice.
Yes.
So Councillor Hidalgo-Faring brought up the motion to have a school board and council joint meeting, seconded by Councillor Martin. Any discussion? Councillor Christ.
We have a pre-session on April 16th and one on the 30th, a study session on April 30th. I'm wondering if either one of those dates might be acceptable.
Well, I think we can reserve it to have staff determine, because they will need to reach out to the school board to determine which dates would be appropriate.
Okay, just giving you the option.
Yeah, no, that's I'm good.
Right, seeing no one else in the queue with questions, let's vote. And that passes unanimously. I would like to make a motion. I move to direct staff to refer the Tower of Compassion that is in Kanemoto Park to the Historic Preservation Council. And the reason, well, I'll wait until we commission. So again, that motion was to refer the Tower of Compassion in Kanemoto Park to the Historic Preservation Commission. Go ahead.
What's the rationale behind the...
Well, that's the discussion.
And that is why we open the discussion after the second. So, Councillor McCoy. That motion was made by myself, seconded by Councillor Martin. Councillor McCoy.
Thank you, Mayor Peck. Just to get a little bit of context around this, what's the rationale behind moving it to them? What would they be doing?
That Tower of Compassion was erected in 1973 and presented to the citizens of Longmont. It was destroyed in the flood, not totally destroyed, but there was a lot of damage to it. And if it is under the Historic Preservation Commission, we can take advantage of all the things that that commission offers and that the National Historic Preservation offers in order to take care of it and maintain it.
Okay.
It was presented to us by the Kanemoto family, I think, of which the park is named after.
Correct.
So,
Thank you.
seeing no one else in the queue for discussion, let's vote. And that passes unanimously. Thank you for that. We are now at the city manager's report.
No report, Mayor and Council.
We don't have any special reports and presentations, so we'll move right along to the first call, public invited to be heard. We need your name and address. If you do not want to give your address, and I have it on the sheet, that is good enough. But if you do not have your address on the sheet, I will not call on you. The first person is Jamie Simo. Jamie, can you turn on the microphone, please? No. It'll turn red when it's on.
Wrong button. Jamie Simo, 517 Independence Drive. I am here tonight to object to holding this year's Independence Day celebration along Martin Street. My objection is that there is really only one viable option for viewing the fireworks at this location, and that is Dickens Farm. Dickens Farm is a natural area, not a community park. There is no hardscape children's playground. There are no recreational facilities like ball fields. In fact, Dickens Farm's full title is Dickens Farm Nature Area and Open Space. It is specifically listed in Longmont's Open Space Master Plan in Figure 1 as being one of Longmont's open spaces. Under Longmont's Land Development Code, a natural or nature area is defined as any of the following: streams, creeks, wetlands, and other bodies of water, including their associated riparian areas. Areas characterized by significant stands of mature trees and vegetation. Areas of topography characterized by steep slopes, erosion characteristics, geographic formations, high visibility from off-site locations, or the presence of rock outcroppings. Any area identified as habitat, natural landmark, or natural area on the map of wildlife and plant habitats, natural landmarks, and natural areas included in Boulder County's comprehensive plan as amended. Any land that qualifies as a wetland under the Federal Clean Water Act, regardless whether shown on any city or county map or inventory. In addition, because Dickens Farm is open space, the Parks and Recreation Advisory Board was recently instructed to evaluate whether hosting 8,000 to 10,000 spectators, the symphony, a beer garden, and carnival rides and games on the property would fall under the definition of passive recreation. Surprising no one, they unanimously voted that it does not. As defined in the Open Space Master Plan, low impact or passive recreation is outdoor recreation that requires minimal development on the recreational site, provides educational, health, and well-being, restorative, and pleasurable opportunities to the public, preserves wildlife in the natural ecosystem of the area and is environmentally sensitive, focuses on the area and its natural state, minimizing environmental impact, has minimal rules of engagement, coordination, formal programming, etc., includes non-consumptive uses such as wildlife observation, walking, biking, etc., emphasizes preservation. Moving the carnival rides and games, beer garden, and music to Martin Street does not solve the problem either, because even if you fence off Dickens, 3 park rangers are not enough to keep people from entering the area anyway. And even if they were somehow able to prevent access, the middle of Martin Street is not really a great place to comfortably view the fireworks. It also doesn't solve the parking problem. To accommodate the large number of cars, seeing as the area isn't very pedestrian friendly, some people will likely have to park across 119. This presents the very real safety issue of people crossing a major highway in the dark. So you've traded one safety issue, the fallout from fireworks, for another, the risk of getting hit by a car. Since you were given no other options to look at besides the fire training center and the area around Martin Street, and the fairgrounds have been vetoed as an option, I'd like to put forward the airport as an option for shooting off the fireworks and Dry Creek. Thank you.
Thank you, Jamie. Sherry Malloy?
Sherry Malloy, 1632 Sherman Way, wearing green, speaking to fireworks location. Moving the festival from impacting open space is a plus. However, the option to launch fireworks from the training center adjacent to Dickens Nature Area is not appropriate due to the impossible task of keeping spectators from the Dickens protected open space. It's important to distinguish between Longmont's neighborhood and community parks and nature areas. Longmont has 25 neighborhood parks from the city's website. Neighborhood parks provide close-to-home recreation activities with playgrounds, playing fields, shelters, and off-leash dog areas. Longmont has 6 large community parks from the website. Community parks serve the larger community and provide space for athletic complexes and major recreation, including pools and recreation centers. By design, community parks have dozens of acres, have groomed turf, and are intended for many varied uses and large volumes of people. Longmont has 3 nature areas. Again, quoted, nature areas provide access to and enjoyment of important natural, historic, and cultural resources and allow for limited recreational uses that fit the unique natural characteristics by promoting low-impact, passive outdoor recreational activities. The training center for fireworks is a poor location because it shares its south border with Dickens Nature Area. There is nowhere else for people to get close. Thousands will flock to this protected open space, which city codes and management plans prohibit regarding appropriate uses. These say nature areas should not be used for special events and should allow only passive low-impact recreation. They close 1 hour after sunset. Community parks have no such restrictions and are open until 11 p.m. If the fire training station is chosen, staff intends to have 3 rangers and install fencing to keep people out of certain sensitive areas at Dickens. That is a workaround which still violates city codes. I've heard that staff doesn't want the fireworks where neighborhoods will be affected. That's impossible, as our city boundaries encapsulate housing throughout Longmont. Because your council communication options do not include any other launch sites, I will mention some better options. First are 2 options for having both festival and fireworks at the same location. Having the festival and fireworks at Fox Hill one more year will give staff in the Kiwanis a full year to explore better options. Number 2, explore Dry Creek Community Park. 81 acres is large enough for both events, and 4 schools for parking and viewing are close by. If the festival is downtown, there are 2 great options for fireworks. Again, Dry Creek Community Park with 81 acres, or the airport with 261 acres. If the airport is used, there is parking and viewing at Silver Creek High School, as well as the old Amgen campus at Nelson and Airport, and Seagate at Nelson and 75th. People could also park and view from Westview.
Thank you,
Thank you.
Sherry. Kimberly Edmondson?
I'm Kimberly Edmondson on Bittersweet Lane, and I like her idea. That was really good, because I agree with her about that. I just wanted to discuss with you a little survey I did on Nextdoor. I put a survey out to the public, because I'm like, I can't be the only one who opposes these meters, am I? And one other person that comes to speak regularly. So I posed a question: if opting out of the smart meters were free with no extortion charges or monthly fees, would you? Or are you getting one because you cannot afford the extra fees to do so? The options were: I want the meter, I'm opting out regardless of fees, and I would opt out if there were no extra cost to me. Within the first 18 hours and 96 votes, 38% of people want the meter, 21% are opting out regardless of fees, and 42% would opt out if it were no cost to them. This survey stayed up for a couple of days until Nextdoor deemed it inappropriate or somehow misinformation, and my account was suspended multiple times over this. In the end, we ended up with 163 votes. 39% want the meter, 18% are opting out regardless of fees, and 42% would opt out if there were no extra cost. Again, I think this whole program should be an opt-in. People should not be penalized and extorted to protect the health of their bodies, their family, protect their home from potential fire risk, and privacy if people have privacy concerns over the meters, with all the data that they can collect with this AMI infrastructure that you're going for. Again, I think I just wanted to put this survey out there so you can see that I'm not the only person who opposes this technology. I would put up another survey asking them why they're opposing the meters if I were allowed to get on Nextdoor. But I haven't even bothered to look to see if my account is permanently suspended or not. But they flagged my post, comment hidden, to see why. It said it's misinformation. I copied my comments that were blocked and all of that so you can read them. I'll submit them to you, but like I can read one here, for example, that was hidden. I was responding to another person's comments. I said the difference between this and a cell phone is that the pulse 24/7 is that a cell phone is that you can shut it off. Those meters pulse 24/7. Other things can be unplugged when not in use. The meter, when it's around the clock exposure. People who say it's safe has never worn a dosimetry badge to work and have never been taught about cumulative dose. It may or may not impact you immediately, but over time it could cause you to get cancer, like glioblastomas that are on the rise. The impact on children due to them having less mass and thinner skulls makes them more impacted by this. The council has been made well aware of all of this before these meters were rolled out and installed. I've been telling them about it for 4 years. But they decided that reducing carbon is supposedly more important despite the conflicting data coming out of that on that topic as well. They also increased dirty electricity.
Thank you, Kimberly. Linda Shockley.
Hi there, Linda Schlocky, 2307 Sherry Marr Street. I'm here to speak not just on behalf of my husband and I, but on the behalf of many of our friends and neighbors, and I want to stress the word many, and their pets who have some major problems with fireworks. I'm asking you, and those people also include veterans with PTSD and many other people with those sorts of issues. And they include people like my husband and myself who are worried about our house burning down as a result. We've had a lot of dry years, And there's a lot of illegal fireworks going on, not just over the 4th of July, but all year round, and all times of the day, late night, early morning, whatever. So anyway, I'm asking you, please don't support fireworks. And I think we object to our taxpayer dollars being used to contribute to them. Now, the drone idea is wonderful, and it would be more economical to let the youth program do that. And I please, don't just consider the loud voices in the room. Please consider the people that are, the many people in our community that are affected by this. I appreciate your consideration.
Thank you, Linda. Shaquille Dalal.
Shaquille Dalal, 219 Francis Street. Mayor and members of council, I'm speaking today regarding the proposed changes to Longmont's parking requirements, item 12C. I want to express my gratitude to the city transportation employees who worked on today's presentation, as municipal requirements for parking are important for their own sake, but also because they impact the cost of housing. And as you know, the cost of housing is a choice, and today we have an opportunity to lower it. There are many things to like in the proposed changes, but I am speaking tonight to ask the city to be more ambitious and eliminate all residential parking minimums. Because the truth is that while we often talk about parking as if it does not have a cost, the costs are in fact immense. These are both direct in terms of the money, but also the opportunity cost of what else could have been in that space. I did some math, and it might be a little wrong, admittedly, but I don't think it's too far off. Longmont has roughly 43,000 units of housing, 2/3 are single-family detached, and the rest are multifamily. Based on Longmont's parking minimums alone, I calculate that the city has 100,000 off-street residential parking spaces. That doesn't include driveways, street parking in residential neighborhoods. Once you account for street parking, again, this is my calculation, I could be wrong, I calculate that Longmont has 3 residential parking spaces for every human that lives in the city. That includes everyone, even if they're a child or even if they don't own a car. There are differing opinions about how much parking is the right amount of parking, but even if every 5-year-old drove a Ford F-150 to their friend's house, I don't think that the result we have is reasonable. I think that any rules with this kind of outcome should be critically re-examined. Let's talk about the cost of all that parking. According to the Parking Reform Network, parking minimums add $200 to $500 per month to a rent or mortgage payment. A typical parking space is about 300 square feet. Your council communication form says that a surface lot costs about $5,000 per space. What would Longmont households spend an extra $15 million per month on other than an off-street parking spot? How many homes could have built on the 1,400 acres taken up by the 200,000 more parking spots than humans that we have who live in the city? What would the city have spent $1 billion on instead of 200,000 on-street parking spaces? I have a simple request. Eliminate residential parking minimums and allow people to use that space to add an ADU, or plant a garden, or reclaim space that their kids can play in, or if they want, they can park a car there. Give people the choice to make the best use of the land that they own. The cost of housing is a choice. Let's choose to lower it. Also, regarding item 12E, I want to echo staff's recommendation that council support HB 241316 and SB 24184. Thank you.
Thank you, Shaquille. Morgan Trexler.
Morgan Trexler, 521 Terry Street. I'm here to discuss the ordinance for off-street parking. I also want to reiterate that I feel like this parking ordinance is not ambitious enough. I feel like the city, parking costs money. It is subsidizing cars. And when we're doing this, we are costing extra money for everyone. It's a poor use of our tax dollars because every extra parking space that we add that we don't need means that we need more plows to plow the roads to the extra parking spots. It means we need more power and water infrastructure to go the extra mile across that parking infrastructure. And so I'm speaking out because I feel like it's a poor use of my tax dollars when we have all this extra parking space that is not being used. Every day you can drive down the road and see, hey, there's empty parking spots all around. out in front of the Walmart, out in front of the Target, in front of most of the restaurants and everywhere in the city. There's lots of extra parking. And so I think that we could be more intentional about our parking situation. And the way that I think we could do that is by dramatically reducing these parking minimums that are enacted. So that we leave the power up to local businesses to decide how much parking space they feel they need for their local business. Thank you. I yield the remainder of my time.
Thank you, Morgan. James Kenworthy. We're waiting.
James Kenworthy, 107 Caribou Place. I was here a few weeks ago to talk about ceasefire, and I'm here to talk about ceasefire again. Injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere. Martin Luther King. When I was here last time, the death toll was about 15,000. I don't know what it is today. But I'm sure somebody back there knows what it is. A lot of women and children. People are starving. They don't have water. They don't have health care. There's a program on KGNU from 6 to 7 talking about this very topic. And the spokesperson said that city councils up and down the Front Range were being advised on this topic. I thought that was a really good program. I didn't get to hear it all because I was on my way down here. If enough of us declare a ceasefire, maybe the governor will declare a ceasefire for the state. Our Congress people are talking about the ceasefire, some of them, and some of them have not. I'll sleep tight tonight knowing I did the right thing. So it's good to see you all, and thanks for your attention.
Thank you, Jim. Taylor Wickland.
Evening, Mayor, council members. My name is Taylor Wickland. I live at 1704 Short Place. Tonight you have an important decision ahead of you, even if it seems so little, and that is residential parking reform. The reason parking reform is so important is because the high cost related to supposedly free parking. I am a member of Launch Longmont Housing, and we commonly say that the cost of housing is a choice, and it is time we make better choices. These choices are so often written in our code that dictate what can and cannot be built. Again, one such choice is parking requirements. Why is parking so important to discuss? Here are 4 reasons. First, finance. According to Parking Reform Network, off-street parking requirements can add an additional $200 to $500 in your rent or your mortgage, even if the parking is used or not. Requiring parking means the car-free or car-light owners are subsidizing car ownership for everyone else. Parking is not free. It is built into the costs of the development. Second, it harms our transportation network. Parking requirements cause even more distance between people and places to be. This then makes walking, biking, and any other micromobility options that much more difficult or even less desired. To make transit a reality in Longmont that this council is in favor of doing, places must be closer together to make transit viable. This means the elimination of parking minimums in all land uses. Third, parking requirements harm the environment. Off-street parking increases our urban heat island effect and produces more polluted runoff into our waterways, not even to mention the environmental costs of concrete and asphalt. Fourth, going from parking minimums to parking maximums in all residential housing types will spur an increase in housing supply. After all, this is what the housing crisis is really about, lack of supply. The city of Austin discovered this by building an abundance of housing. Rent and overall costs go down. This means more units in a development, either deemed affordable or market rate, prices go down. Most importantly, and finally, I would like to commend the city staff behind me for being proactive over the last decade to find opportunities to reform parking requirements. Staff is working to bring down the cost of housing, improve transit opportunities, and encourage multimodal movement. Tonight, reforming residential parking into maximums is a step in the right direction. However, I would say that what is before council is not as ambitious as hoped, but I acknowledge the very important advances it is making. To quote Donald Shoup, the national expert on parking, "Land is expensive for housing, but it is free for parking, and you wonder why we have a problem." Thanks for all that you do, and I hope you see the opportunity before you to be a little bit more ambitious. Thank you.
Thank you, Taylor. Lance Whitaker.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. My name is Lance Whitaker. I live at 1750 Collier Street. I've been a resident for over 40 years now and would like to bring to your attention today is National American Diabetes Association Day. It is also National Epilepsy Awareness Day, and as you may or may not know, cannabis has a lot to do with epilepsy and helping people out with epilepsy. Today is also National Nougat Day. It is also National Spinach Day. And we couldn't have National Spinach Day without a quote from Popeye. And I will give it to you. I am what I am, and that's all I am. Thank you, ma'am and Mayor. And I find it sort of ironic that a lot of people are calling for the ceasefire, and you guys are looking to restore a temple of peace in Chigoda Park. I would like to remind you that that temple is a temple for peace. So remember that when you're thinking about a ceasefire. Thank you. Have a good day.
Thank you, Lance. Igul Pardane.
Hello, my name is Igul Pardane. And I live on Pheasant Drive. I've lived in Longmont for almost 3 years now, and I'm here to talk about the ceasefire resolution. I'm Muslim, and it's our holy month of Ramadan right now, and I fasted today from a little before sunset to sundown, so that's about 14 hours. I just broke my fast because it was sundown just a little while ago. And it's really not a big deal to me because I can break my fast with clean water and any kind of food that I want, and I can continue eating throughout the night. And I've never experienced hunger and thirst longer than this, and I really can't imagine what that would be like if it lasted for days and weeks. And it really breaks my heart that my brothers and sisters in faith in Gaza cannot do that. They can't properly break their fasts. Their access to food, water, and humanitarian aid is very limited. Clean water and a proper meal, they're a luxury in Gaza now. According to UNICEF, children in Gaza barely have clean water to drink, and that is not an exaggeration. And it pains me that the Muslims in Gaza have to spend the whole month of Ramadan wondering if they'll be able to break their fast with a meal or with just scraps of food. And a ceasefire would stop the devastating starvation and dehydration of people in Gaza. I also have a Palestinian friend who lives in Colorado, and she has family in Gaza. She tried to get them out, and I tried to help her get them out, but she couldn't. And whenever someone asks her where she's from, she is reduced to having to say she's from another country other than Palestine, because she fears discrimination if she were to talk about her heritage. Can you imagine how much safer my friend and other Palestinians, as well as Muslims like myself, would feel if our cities passed ceasefire resolutions? It would mean that ending the suffering of others, as well as those of immigrants and their families abroad, is a central concern to all of us. A ceasefire resolution in Longmont is a step towards a permanent and complete ceasefire in Gaza, and it's a huge deal to innocent civilians undergoing trauma for now more than 5 months. The effects of the decisions we're making in the comfort of our peaceful seats will last for generations. The United Nations Security Council just yesterday passed a resolution calling for a ceasefire, and let us back this resolution and call for a permanent ceasefire. People in Gaza didn't choose to be born there, but we can choose to help stop their suffering. Thank you.
Thank you. Nadine Lester.
Is it on? Good evening, Mayor Peck and council members. Nadine Lester, 1517 Mayfield Lane. When I talk to my neighbors and friends about the 4th of July, all of them say they want Longmont's fireworks display to be held at the Boulder County Fairgrounds. We wonder why Longmont doesn't use the county fairgrounds anymore. In recent years, Fox Hill didn't offer enough visibility for the community at large, and now we hear about this new proposal over by Dickens Farm, but nobody really understands it. Any site where mortars are being fired will have safety concerns. Any site will need to accommodate viewers, parking, and crowds. For years, the city was able to manage these public safety issues very well at the fairgrounds without breaking its own rules about recreation on open space properties. Locating the fireworks launch site adjacent to the Dickens Nature Area is a bad idea. Of course, folks will get around any barriers the city may put up to protect the area because they've basically been invited to find a good viewing spot along the river. And of course, they'll be there after sunset when the park ought to be closed. The city says it intends to install fencing and have 3 rangers on duty to keep people out of certain sensitive areas. Well, I wouldn't like to have I wouldn't like to have the job of telling people to move along. The public will show up, and then at best, they'll be confused and unhappy. And I think the city has far better intentions than that for Longmont's 4th of July. Our municipal code, open space, and wildlife management plans, and Dickens Farm Plan all were approved by City Council after thorough public input. These say open space lands should not be used for special events, only low-impact recreation between the hours from sunrise to sunset. Staging the fireworks at the training center with people viewing at the Dickens Nature Area violates these basic civic rules and guidelines. Over $4 million taxpayer dollars have been invested at Dickens to plant vegetation and install irrigation. For plants already struggling, and the area does not need a crowd of folks with dogs, strollers, fireworks, and explosives trashing the place after sunset. In addition, Boulder County holds the conservation easement for the Dickens Nature Area. Won't the city need to consult with Boulder County to get their approval before proceeding? Do you think a crowd partying on this protected land is part of the county's vision for its use? And what about repair and restoration costs after the event? These should not come out of open space funds. I'm aware that the fairgrounds is not an option for the display this year, but I'm here to ask you, what's it going to take to put the fireworks back where they belong at the Boulder County Fairgrounds? Until you figure that out, you're going to have unhappy residents no matter what the city tries to do for them on July 4th. In the meantime, I think we should explore better options this year. The airport has a great location for launching fireworks and for viewing them. Let's locate the display where we can have our fireworks and enjoy them too. And then before next year.
Thank you, Nadine.
Thank you.
Jacob Loss.
Jacob Loss, 716 and 1/2 Main Street. I was once told that a piece of Israel is in the soul of every Jew. As an American Jewish anti-Zionist, the recent months have made that piece of my soul fester into grotesque reflections of rubble and bone, of bombs and guns, of blood and bile. An image distorted by a war claimed to be waged in the name of all Jews while being orchestrated by a state hell-bent to silence Jews like me and others like me. But I still want to see Israel. I still want to see Tel Aviv and Jerusalem. I still want to see the Jordan River and the Mediterranean Sea, the olive trees, the fields, the deserts, and the mountains. But I don't want to see today's Israel, nor do I want to see today's Palestine.
Rather, I want to see tomorrow's united and liberated Palestinian-Israeli nation. A nation where Rami al-Halawi, a 12-year-old child from East Jerusalem, can record a video celebrating Ramadan with friends and fireworks without being hit by a bullet to the heart from an Israeli occupation officer and being labeled a terrorist by Minister of National Security Itamar Ben-Gvir. A nation where Alon Shamriz, Yotam Haim, and Samar Talalka can go to a free Gaza without the threat of being taken hostage by Hamas and shot by Israeli invasion forces as they waved white flags, hoping to finally go home. A nation where Vivian Silver, a 74-year-old Canadian-Israeli peace activist, is able to live a life of reconciliation, fulfilled in her life's purpose, rather than killed in a kibbutz, having yet to achieve her life's goal. A nation where Joanne Yahya Yosef Al-Astal, a 4-year-old from northern Gaza, can run along the fields and along the coasts of the Gaza Strip rather than being buried in the remnants of her neighborhood home. That future is gone now, but a similar one may still be in our future. It may still be possible. However, that future is impossible as long as the United States of America continues to send military and economic support to the state of Israel. Support which is being used to further the Gaza Nakba, as Likud Minister Avi Dikta stated, is the inevitable and intentional end result of the Knesset's response to October 7th. In the name of hope for this ideal future, we must refuse to be silent in this time of injustice, which threatens to embitter and rot our souls. I urge the Council to adopt a resolution calling on the federal government to cease all military and economic support to the State of Israel until a hostage exchange and permanent ceasefire agreement are met, lest the images of a Gaza turn to a field of rubble and bone, bombs and guns, of blood and bile fester in our souls forever. All power to all people. Thank you.
Thank you, Jacob. Steve Altshuler.
Steve Altshuler, 1555 Taylor Drive. Got a whole conglomeration of things today. One thing is it possible to get the 3-minute clock that used to be on that
I don't know.
television there to be back up so
It's
so
not
all
on-
the
it's
speakers
not on
know
the
how their
screen.
time is going?
It's not on the screen.
Yeah.
It's good point.
Okay.
And we'll look at it, but right at this moment, yeah, we're not.
I just
gonna-
wanted to point that out. It makes it easier for the speakers.
Great, thanks.
And I want to, like I said, the conglomeration of things. For one, I want you to know I do not object at all to my tax dollars being used to celebrate the 4th of July. Somebody said earlier that everybody is against it. I am not. I love America. Celebrating it the 4th of July every year is fantastic, and I've really missed seeing fireworks the last couple of years. One of the things I've been talking about a lot is the illegal immigration. And I know that when I come up here, I suspect some of you kind of tune me out. I would like to emphasize the word illegal in the immigration. Myself and nobody I know is against legal immigration. America takes in 1.5 million legal immigrants every year. They're vetted at over 300 border stations. They're medically checked out to make sure they don't have diseases. We know who they are. We know where they're going. We can fingerprint them. If they commit a crime later, we have a record of them. It's the 10 million in the last 3 years that I and many people I know have the objection with. And it's, even, I said this briefly last week, even President Trump has flown in 320,000 illegals, not even going through the border station. He's flown them into 43 different airports across the country and won't even tell us which airports. So this is not the way our country's security is supposed to be. And I've got a lot, well, one thing real quick, a Colorado town voted 7-0 to affirm its status as a non-sanctuary city amid growing fears that migrants would soon flood the area from nearby Denver. The goal is to make sure that Denver knows that we will not be accepting any busloads of migrants into our community. And that touches with what I've been saying for the last few weeks. I think Longmont should both be a non-sanctuary city. If Denver wants to take them in, that's their choice, and they should stay in Denver. But we should let Denver know that we don't need hundreds or thousands of more illegals coming into our city. Now, to touch real briefly on the economics. We have roughly 6,500 illegal people in Longmont. Darn, I knew that would happen.
Thank you, Steve. Deborah Young.
Hello, I'm Deborah Young at Mount Meeker. So I just want to mention the goals set forth in the UN 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development, which the U.S. has signed, show that the pursuit of the right of knowledge and action is no longer just a matter of human welfare. It has become a question of the survival of our civilization at large. This cannot be successfully addressed without comparative knowledge, intercultural understanding, and last but not least, sufficient empathy and solidarity. This is why I represent the Fulbright program. I have had 5 Fulbrights, including that several in Palestine. I have a current one pending. Obviously, I haven't been able to go because of the current situation, but I do hope to go and return to Gaza so that one day I can again work as a Fulbright scholar, sharing knowledge to create more humane and just world. The essence of intercultural education is the acquisition of empathy, the ability to see the world as others see it, and to allow for the possibility that others may see something that we have failed to see, or see it more accurately. There's also historically the 1989 Convention on the Rights of the Child, which provided the framework for child's rights, and since young children have become important to policymakers and agendas, national and local. The environment we know influences physiological and neurological developments, which drive biological, psychological, and social behavior for our communities. And yes, all of us are having that secondary trauma with what goes on in the world. So it does really influence and impact the citizens of Longmont. So I mention this because I have stories. I brought my own children to Palestine, and going to the consulate in Jerusalem, we were tear gassed. We've watched 30 people get shot in 2.5 hours. We have witnessed the struggle that takes place under occupation, and this is in the West Bank. So I urge all of us to stand in solidarity. Please support a ceasefire and unhindered humanitarian medical aid to Gaza. Thank you.
Thank you, Deborah. Marie Nicholson.
Good evening. My name is Marie Nicholson Hutt. I live on 1193 Fall River Circle. Thanks. I'm here just because I can't just not say anything. And yesterday, fortunately, the UN finally was able to pass a resolution for the U.S. decided to abstain, so that would pass. Unfortunately, it was a 15 days ceasefire, and I think it's still important for you all to consider signing an ordinance for the permanent ceasefire. We are human. We are human. They are human beings. So I just want you to consider, I feel like everyone speaking out about this is starting to have an impact, and that we're starting to see some change. And I know we're just Longmont, but it's important. We have a sizable community of refugees from Bosnia down in Boulder, and many of them are my friends, and they spoke to me when I first became Muslim 20 years ago about what they went through. And it's the same thing going on right now with the Palestinians. If you want to know a little bit just and have a laugh, there's a Netflix show called Mo. It's all Palestinian Americans. It's really good. And we're just regular people, and they just want to survive, okay? So, yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Marie. Sue Connolly.
Sue Conley, 136 South Main Street, Dickens Homestead. Mayor and City Council. Did you know that the corner of the fire training building and the corner of my historic wooden grain elevator is only 1,600 feet apart? A 10-inch fireworks shell can have a radius of up to 700 feet. So that leaves less than 1,000 feet between the two buildings. I don't think anyone would like to be that close to any large fireworks. I looked at the original fireworks fallout zone from the February 27th meeting and the one you have now. If you'll notice, there is now considerable fallout over the Dickens Farm Nature Area. The Parks and Recreation Advisory Board voted unanimously that the use of the Dickens Farm Nature Area for the 4th of July event did not conform to the definition of passive recreation. You are following the letter of the conservation easement, but certainly not the spirit. Have you considered the thousands of people in the nature area? 8,000 people will have significant impact to the nature area. Also, thinking that none of those 8,000 people will bring fireworks to the nature area? By that time of the year, the natural grasses, weeds, and shrubbery, etc., are normally hip deep and chest high. This creates an extreme fire hazard without adding fireworks to the equation. You have 5 options that were provided to council, but they still shoehorn the 4th of July event around the Dickens Farm Nature Area. How about a 6th option? I believe the Parks and Recreation Advisory Board has recommended Vance Brand Airport for such an event. It is fenced and could be closed to the public and can be seen all over southwest Longmont. I strongly urge you to reconsider the location of the 4th of July fireworks show for the health of the Dickens Farm Nature Area as well as the city of Longmont. Thank you.
Thank you, Sue. I hope I say this name correctly. Varas Gerard? Woo!
Okay. Hi, my name is Faraz Gerard, and I live east of North 75th Street. That's cool, Mayor? Cool. In recent years, my parents, who own a Bulger restaurant, moved to a farm. We're new to farm life. However, it turns out my ancestors are also farmers. They stewarded the land as they grew olive trees, orange trees, and watermelons, among other produce. And my ancestors were also landowners and regional leaders / tax collectors in towns of Jenin, Sanur, and Nablus. There's a structure named Qal'a Jarrar, or Fortress Jarrar in English. It was built to watch guard over the region. The building is still around to this day in the West Bank. See, this is the Palestine I want people to learn about, to see, to celebrate. Trust me, October 7th was not a celebration, rather a declaration of war. That day, my thoughts loomed as Israeli civilian death toll rose. I knew for every innocent Israeli murdered, tenfold, never mind, 25-fold Palestinian civilians would be slaughtered. Since then, over 1,200 Israelis and over 31 and counting Palestinians have been killed. This isn't the peace that I seeked. Most of us didn't want this war. Sadly, it pains me to say that the attack carried out by Hamas on 10/7 was a consequence of the 75-plus year occupation of Palestine by modern-day Israel. Thus, we need change. I come here tonight not to ask you to move heaven and earth. Please don't rescue hostages nor provide medical aid. I kindly ask you to please make a carefully thought-out consideration towards a humanitarian long-term / permanent ceasefire proclamation for Gaza. I get it, it's a geopolitical issue, so how does this relate to Longmont? Please allow me to explain. I don't feel like I'm represented by my federal legislators. I don't think anybody does. That's why I reach out to you, because I feel maybe you could listen to me and everybody, because I want somebody to actually care what I think on especially the local level. And I've watched the likes of Mr. Hodges and more so Mr. Auschler, I apologize, speak his truth, and I feel bad for the man. I don't blame him. I mean, I worry about my relatives too every day. In his defense, I'd get irritated and angry if my family were in danger. Also, I like to think he's tired of being stereotyped as maybe Nazi Zionists, just like I'm sick of my people being stereotyped as rapists, goat lovers, or terrorists. So I have a reason to believe, although our perceptions are different, our perspective is similar. On the surface, proclamation is symbolic. Beyond face value, however, it can be a tool of open dialogue and reconciliation. It can unite people that otherwise would have remained divided. Thank you.
Thank you for us.
Thank you, Mayor.
Greg Monesi. I don't think I said that right, Greg.
Greg Morrissey.
Morrissey.
You were close. And I've got some pictures I wish to share, if that's okay.
Thank you.
As you can see those pictures, that's the tunnel that follows the oligarchy ditch under Hover, just north of Hover and 17th Avenue. And you saw the repairs that were done. If you look at the first photo, you see how with like someone smacked it with a hammer or something, it's damaged. Some of the repairs have been done right now, but then on the last page, I had a recommendation. I've been in the electrical field all my life, and if you put those lights up there, they're built a lot better, and they will handle the environment a lot better. They won't be, they're designed to be on the outside, not on the inside. So just a thought for that, but I brought this up at the meeting at the Coffee with Council. I brought her up there, and she said she was going to put the work order in. I saw the work had been started. Yay, keep going, it's good. But then why would people wreck lights going in through a tunnel? I don't know.
I don't either.
Yeah, I don't know. Yes. Someone hit it with a hammer, but I just appreciate your work on that, and it's going to be taken care of, and hopefully it's some different lights in there that will handle the environment being wet and outdoors. And that's all it for right now. Thank you.
Thank you, Greg Morrissey. Gracie Beckman.
Hi, my name is Gracie Beckman. I am 8 years old and I live on Schlegel Street. I prefer not to build townhomes as part of the Quail Road annexation, but if you have to do it, do it. But do not build a road connecting Clover Basin and 89th. First of all, it would be dangerous. Second of all, it would be noisy and disturbing to the people living in the neighborhood. Last but not least, we have built a community where people walk, bike, skateboard, and roller skate freely. But if we put a road through there, it would totally wreck and destroy that community. All in all, I encourage you to rethink the plans for connecting Clover Basin and 89th.
Thank you, Gracie. Very well done. Morley Beckman.
Morley Beckman, 9682 Schlegel Street. I've lived in Longmont for about 5 years. What drew me here was the community, the health, the quality of life. I oppose the conceptual plan for the Quail Street annexation. I don't oppose the annexation of the land or building townhomes there at all. I understand the need for housing. What I oppose is the proposed road layout. The vehicular access would connect 89th to Clover Basin, and this would bring local and commuter traffic directly through the Schlegel neighborhood. We have narrow streets. It's a very pedestrian-friendly neighborhood, and it's actually a thoroughfare connecting the greenways all the way from Fordham Street in the east to 4 schools in the west: Blue Mountain, Eagle Crest Elementary, where my daughter Gracie goes, Altona, and Silver Creek. We have cyclists, skateboarders, school children walking those roads every single day and on the weekend. And I would really encourage, fine with the annexation, but can we please, please, please rethink the plan for connecting 89th through to Clover Basin? I think that's a really big safety issue for the community. And if there's anything I can do to help change the plans, I'd love to. Thank you. And real quick, I have a picture that my 6-year-old was not able to stay for the length, but she drew a picture of the cranky people in the neighborhood with the cars driving through. So I'd love to hand this over to you guys.
Thank you. All right. We're getting feedback. I think it might be from the live feed, perhaps. Do you hear it? It's about, it's delayed. Well, let's move on and maybe we'll take a break and look at it then. James Beckman. He's not here. Okay. Mike Sandoval.
Mike Sandoval, 242 East Mountain View. Been a resident here in Longmont for about 50 years. Reason I'm here is I'm a landlord. Just had to evict a tenant, and now they're homeless, and I don't like that idea. I talked to a cop. They said, "Well, that's what happens. It ain't your problem." But what I'm here for is to try to give a recommendation. I guess there's many strategies and solutions that have progressed at the local, state, and federal levels. Input from the Colorado Department of Resources. Homelessness can happen to a broad range of individuals, whether it's due to getting sick, losing a job, a family conflict, expensive housing, the Marshall Fire, the 100-year-old flood in 2013 here in Longmont, or mental health issues and drug addiction, and those exiting incarceration. The vision is that everyone in Colorado has a safe, stable, and affordable place to live. And the issue is homelessness is a result of individual adverse circumstances colliding with inadequate support systems. Homelessness is a dynamic, ever-changing problem. There is no one-size-fit-all solution for homelessness. And it can take an entire community working together to tackle a complex problem. No single individual, agency, or organization can solve homelessness alone. A strong homelessness response is built on partnership across agencies, organizations, and community leaders. I guess we now have an act. There's 50,000 more people covered by Colorado Medicaid system in 2019 that were without stable housing. Some of the goals is to identify individuals at risk and ensure that they are safe, create access to long-term structural solutions, helping those experiencing homelessness find stable, secure, and affordable housing as soon as possible. Proven solutions, there's coordinated entry, and it's coordinated with Boulder County, and it can ensure that homelessness services are provided with equity, efficiency, but the thing is, I took someone to the Longmont homeless organization here in Longmont, and they basically send that person to a Boulder shelter. So we didn't solve it. It was have Boulder solve it. So some of the recommendations is have low barrier shelters. Shelters without restrictive entry requirements create spaces in which people can feel safe and connected with resources. I guess the City of Colorado Springs collaborates with community health partners on a coordinated strategy to leverage emergency solutions, grants, funding to encourage policy changes on housing. Okay, so there more people live in those shelters and don't leave. Okay, so solutions, I recommend an ordinance that the Boulder County, there's some opioid state funding, and then there's the increase in property tax and mill levies. I would like some of those funds. Okay.
Mike, would you mind giving your contact information to Crystal at the end, and we can have someone contact you and explain what we're doing and what's available? Thank you. Jonathan Singer.
Good evening, City Council. I'm Jonathan Singer, former state representative Jonathan Singer. I'm here to talk to you about why international policy is local policy. But before I do that, I want to start by recognizing the generational, vicarious, personal trauma and hurt that many of us have experienced, or at least had resurface since October 7th. The reason I bring this up today is because out of hurt oftentimes comes hate. Not every person that is fighting for a safe and secure Israel is Islamophobic or anti-Israel or anti-Arab, excuse me. Not every person calling for a safe and secure Palestine state is anti-Semitic. But some are on both sides. So to those people, I see your hurt. And I unequivocally rebuke that hatred. If we could bomb or terrorize our way to peace, that would have happened decades ago. Instead, we see dispossession, diaspora, and a seeming never-ending cycle of violence that makes widows, parentless children, and orphans out of infants. I was horrified on October 7th as I held my breath from my family and friends and colleagues in Israel, but it didn't take long for me to begin to hold my breath from my Muslim family, friends, and colleagues who faced threats here. Colleagues in hijabs spat upon for nothing more than their own identity. Even a couple of months ago, I had to explain to my 8-year-old and my 5-year-old they might not be able to attend Hebrew school because of a bomb threat that temple received. My children are innocent. The children of Gaza and Israel and the West Bank are innocent. It's time we act like that. It's time for a bilateral ceasefire to stop the killing, release the detainees and hostages, return basic services like food and water to those who are starving and dying. My faith instructs me that we need to follow Baal Tashit. When you lead a siege against a city, many days you may not destroy any tree of hers. To hew an axe against it, from it you will eat, and you may not cut it off. This is happening in our community. This is a local issue. If we can't talk about this, how can we expect there to be peace in the Middle East? So I'm asking the City Council to consider a resolution that talks about a bilateral ceasefire, a return of the hostages and detainees, a return to humanitarian services. And our Talmud asks of our leaders, if not now, when? And if not you, then who? We may not all agree on everything, but the path should begin to peace should begin with us now. Thank you.
Thank you, Jonathan. Perfect timing. So that is the last person on our list.
Oh, wait, don't turn it around.
You already went, Lance. There was, but okay. Let me. So I do see 3 other names on here. 2 of them are on it doesn't matter. We'll do it anyway. Dan Sorrells. I'm sorry, you were on a different sheet. I didn't see it.
Hi, I'm Dan Sorrells. I live at 328 Grant Street. And I'm here to talk about the item 12C on changing the parking regulations. When I was growing up, I'm of an age where cars were like freedom, and it represented freedom. Just recently I'd seen a picture, and I think it was from a GM picture, that pictured, a highway filled with cars. It looked great. In a previous kind of economic life, I'd done a lot of work with in the right-of-way industry, doing litigation support, and worked with a lot of highway departments. And generally, their solution for congestion was build more lanes, which only brought more cars. And what ends up happening is that we become slaves to the cars. We become slaves to this. Excessive parking has the exact same effect. And worse, it takes away land that could otherwise be used for productive uses, such as housing. Now, some may complain that we need more parking. When I came in, I noticed that almost all the parking spaces out here were taken. And as I was walking up, I was thinking, I wonder how many of these cars were driven here by only one person, just single occupancy. It's one of the reasons that, I mean, we use cars for everything. We don't need to. Double occupancy would certainly reduce the need for a lot more parking. So what I'm asking is limit the supply and use land productivity to encourage more and better housing. And let's stop being slaves by getting in cars or having the tail of extra parking wag the dog of adequate housing. That's all I've got. Thank you.
Thank you. David Kimmett.
Thank you, Mayor Peck and Council. A quick question. I am not a resident of Longmont, and I know that was, I think this time is reserved for residents only. So
Correct.
Should I wait?
If you don't mind.
Yeah.
Thank you, David.
Mm-hmm.
Gary Hodges.
All right, I'm calling an audible tonight. Gary Hodges, 2148 Stewart Street. I intended to finish up my 7-talk series here on energy with my conclusion, but there's just, wow, real cornucopia tonight, right? And I just think there's so much on your plate, and I feel like what I want to tell you is really important, and I'm going to wait till next week, and maybe there'll be fewer people so we can focus on that a little bit more. Parking, a lot of people speaking in favor of limiting parking spaces and about all this extra parking. Where is all this parking in my neighborhood? I mean, it's packed, and it makes for a dangerous situation, actually. When you start limiting parking spaces, people start filling up the streets, and then children are ducking in and out between cars. When I grew up in Florida, there were 2 young boys. One was a brother of my friend of mine in school, and they were on a little cart thing that went out between 2 cars right down the street from me, and were killed by a car that came by. It was absolutely horrendous. Bomb farm developer some months ago was in here, and he said he once built a development that had inadequate parking, and he said that was just a horrendous mistake, and he would never do it again. So there's that out there. And I'm going to speak a little bit about geopolitical issues. You know where I was at last week. I'm just going to kind of continue that on. But, I think it's interesting that this brings out discussion of war. And, there was a ceasefire on October 6th. And there's a lot of wars out there. So if you choose to do a resolution, what I'm requesting is, make your own choice there. But let's add everything, and let's cover all bases, and maybe we get some other people. I mean, I think we know why without saying why this thing draws so much interest, but so just for the rest of my time, Kurdish separatism in Iran, that's up to 58,000. Kurdish-Turkish conflict, 120,000. Jamaican political conflict, 140,000. Indo-Pakistani wars, that's wide range here, 200 to 2 million, 200,000 to 2 million. Insurgency in Balochistan, I guess, 21,400. Insurgency in Northeast India, 40,500. Papa conflict, up to 500,000 people. Naxalite Maoist insurgency, up to 14,000. Civil conflict in the Philippines, 165,000, 213,000. Ethnic violence in Papua New Guinea, 20,000. Internal conflict in Bangladesh, 1,800. Ituri conflict is in DR Congo, 65,000. Conflict in the Niger Delta, 2,600. Conflict for control of favelas in Rio, 14,000. Central. Okay.
Thank you, Gary. Now we are at the end of the list. So thanks, everyone. Do we need a bio break up here? No.
Harold said yes.
I think we need 5 minutes. We should have a 5-minute break.
Did you do that?
So do you think they'll do it at the airport? Sounds like they're out of all the people at the airport.
Yeah, it's a good location.
Is that a doable?
Yeah, it's totally doable.
Where would people park?
Silver Creek High School, watch it there. Westview, watch it there. Seagate, watch it there. You know, there's nothing in between all of them. Amgen, watch it there, you know.
I'm sure you're articulate.
Ladies and gentlemen, we are back and ready to continue with our agenda. Come on down.
I noticed that they did change the view from up there. It used to be a close-up of the public eye. If you heard, you could just see the one person. And now it's really hard to see because it's so far.
We are now at the consent agenda, an introduction and reading by title of first reading ordinances. Crystal, would you please read the consent agenda into the record?
Yes, Mayor. The second reading and public hearing for all ordinances introduced on this agenda will be held on April 9th of 2024. Item 9A is Ordinance 2024-24, a bill for an ordinance making additional appropriations for expenses and liabilities of the City of Longmont for the fiscal year beginning January 1, 2024. Item 9B is Ordinance 2024-25, a bill for an ordinance amending Chapter 14, Section 14.07.060 of the Longmont Municipal Code on redevelopment credits for water and sewer fees, lapse. Item 9C is Ordinance 2024-26, a bill for an ordinance amending Title 2, Chapter 2.12, Section 2.12.030 on compensation of council members. Item 9D is Ordinance 2024-27, a bill for an ordinance conditionally approving the vacation of Fedora Avenue, generally located south of 6th Avenue, east of Sherman Street, and west of Grant Street, and reserving city sanitary sewer easements.
Thank you, Crystal. Do councilors want to pull any items off of the consent agenda? Councilor Martin.
If nobody else does, I move the consent agenda.
Second.
Okay, the consent agenda has been moved by Councilor Martin, seconded by Councilor McCoy. Let's vote. It went away. Let's do a voice vote. All those in favor of moving the consent agenda, please say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? That passes unanimously. We are now on the ordinance on second reading and public hearings on any item. The first one is a public hearing on consolidated annual performance report called CAPER for 2023 Community Development Block Grant, CDBGs, and CDBG COVID programs, and 2023 annual performance report for the Affordable Housing Fund and Attainable Housing Fund. Molly O'Donnell is here for a presentation.
Thank you, Mayor and members of council. Molly O'Donnell, Housing Director. I want to introduce Christy Wiseman. She's our new Housing Investment Manager. So she's going to be taking some of these from after tonight, from this point forward. So you'll be hearing from her more. I'm going to go ahead and have a seat, though, and work from here.
Okay.
All right, so we are here tonight to go over the Housing and Community Investment Division's accomplishments for 2023 under our CDBG programs and our affordable and attainable housing programs. Starting with our CDBG program, we have offered a rehab program within the city for a very, very, very long time. And over the last couple of years, with our new team that came into a place about 2 years ago, we've really taken the program and expanded it and made it really efficient and taken it to new heights with the help of Adam Sanderson, one of our staff members that was really integral to this program. So in 2023, we helped 20 households in Longmont for a total of $255,000 and change of projects to help people stay housed. You'll lower utility bills to reduce housing costs and age in place. There are emergency projects and architectural barrier removals, and then efficiency upgrades as well are all possible. The cost per project has increased, which we've seen for the last several years. Is not really a surprise with construction prices, but it continues to happen. But we also continue to help more families. So we were up from 15 in 2022. Here's just some examples of typical projects. This is an accessibility project for a tub shower combo that we have done for one of our low-income families here in Longmont. Overall, we also administered $102,000 of the City of Boulder's CDBG funding. So we've been testing out a regional program, operating other jurisdictions' programs as well. We helped 12 households in Boulder. Moving to our public service category, we continue to have given $50,000 to support the Boulder County Housing Counseling Program. This is a really valuable program. We get great feedback all the time. Helped 191,000. I was reading the leveraging. 191 households in 2023 to go through finance counseling, home ownership preparation, helping to stay housed if you're having financial difficulties doing so. We completed a lot of work with the Longmont Housing Authority. They definitely have a in-depth knowledge of the city's funding availability now, since they're closely connected. So the LHA put in a lot of applications last year and the year before. We have one project that's still in progress. That's the LHA security cameras. We're working with other city groups to make sure that we can do a citywide technology effort to make sure it all ties together and really works. And so that is coming in 2024. But the other projects have been completed. We replaced the playground at Aspen Meadows neighborhood. We contributed to the acquisition for Village on Main, which is part of that resyndication of tax credits and rehab program to preserve 72 units of low-income housing for seniors. And then completed parking lot upgrades at the Hover Crossing property that houses 100 low-income seniors, just to make sure that that parking lot meets ADA requirements, doesn't have trip hazards and such. We also completed a roof rehab for a couple of properties operated by the In-Between for transitional housing. They serve very low-income families, and there are 20 households living at these properties. So we help them get a new roof and make sure that building remains an asset for the In-Between in the long run. We've got partial payment happening in 2024 as well. Our CDBG CV program, this is funding that we received in 2020 for the purpose of addressing the COVID-19 pandemic. We have been spending on this each year since, but we don't get new funding each year. It's just that same one block from 2020. We made good progress in 2023. We do have a portion left for 2024. What we did this year is we spent over $70,000 doing ADA upgrades at LHA low-income housing properties. This was a range of ADA work outside, a lot of concrete work that is big ticket items that cannot be supported within LHA budget, and also adapting apartments for hearing and vision impairment to make sure that all of the properties meet the standards set by HUD and offer those opportunities for people. Also helped the Center for People with Disabilities to do concrete and ADA work in their parking lot. Same with the Veterans Community Project. And both of those at the time were owned by the LHA and leased to those organizations. We continued our Fresh Start Utility Billing Assistance Program. This year we spent $130,000 and change helping 112 households pay utility bills. So this is for people that could demonstrate a financial impact from COVID, and also were at risk of shut off. And so we wanted to make sure they're safely housed. And so that helped a lot of families get through the year. This program is complete. A lot of new programs have come out that ended up replacing the need for this program. So there's still resources out there. They're just coming from a different source. We also completed a feasibility study for the Recovery Cafe. This is an organization operating out of a church basement in town, trying to provide recovery supports for those working through substance abuse. And so they really needed a permanent home. And so we invested to help them figure out if they could do an addition at the Suites supportive housing, which would have been really beneficial for those residents as well as Recovery Cafe. So we completed that feasibility study. It was determined not to be feasible for financing reasons, but Recovery Cafe is still looking for other sites for their home base, and in exchange for the assistance provided, they actually did start satellite services at the Suites, and it's wildly popular and going very well. So we're still getting the need met there, just in a different way. And so that's our balance left, over $68,000 of the original $760,000 or so provided in 2020. And again, these are taking a long time to spend. They come with a lot of restrictions on how they can be used. So we've been carefully planning that, but we will be done in 24. Here's some program metrics under these two CDBG programs. Overall, we served 1,320 households. That does include 550 assumed households between the Center for People with Disabilities and the Veterans Community Project, because they serve about that many people per year, and we can presume that they are benefited from this funding source. So that includes those. We spent 75.3% of our funds this year, so that is an increase from prior years. And we are 84% through the CV grant at this point in time. But we brought in $12.2 million by using these CDBG funds on these projects. So that means that for every $1 in CDBG funds spent, we brought in $17.59 of outside money that was invested into Longmont. So it's, even though CDBG funds are traditionally going down year over year nationwide, they still are a great financing tool to spur investment here. We spent all of our admin like we have been, which plays into city budget conversations and how we staff up. It costs more to administer CDBG funds than the allowable amount set by HUD. So the Affordable Housing Fund does have to supplement to make sure we can run it. And we spent 98.9% of that funding for low and moderate income residents this year. There was only 14 non-low and moderate income residents supported through the Boulder County Housing Counseling Program. This is something we show each year just to show that we are not holding on to our money. So the column on the far right is unexpensed funds from 2022 that carried into 23. And then when you add in our new funding sources for that year, and then show what we've paid in the second to the right column, what you should usually see, unless there's a extenuating circumstance, is the money left at the end of last year is equal to or lower than when we came in, meaning we're getting the money out the door. Looking at equity and inclusion, I think our numbers got a little bit, there's a number issue there on one of those. Anyways, our serving white residents here, that was more like 85%. So I think we've got a little number transcription issue on that one. But generally, we've served 85% of people that identify their race as white. The 9.4% in other is more like 8%. And then what you do see on those couple other numbers are just about the right number that we've served. When you look at, I've added a couple extra graphs about serving those that identify as disabled, those that identify as Spanish speaking, and some female head of household data. I will say that this does not include those assumed beneficiaries of CPWD and VCP because they don't actually report race and ethnicity data, so we don't want to skew the numbers. But that's not included there. So you will see, in reality, a lot more disabled people aided by this funds. This is something we did last year, trying to show how we're serving our community, whether we are doing a good job of trying to serve those that are underrepresented in our community traditionally in funding programs. And so what we've added in is if we have funded people that identify within these races and as Hispanic, whether we have increased or decreased our service to those groups from last year in that first red and green column. And then overall looking at Longmont population, if we are hitting the mark above or below those that are residing in our community. So overall, we have increased from last year the number of people that we've served that identify as other multi-race. Everything else is holding pretty steady, but a little bit below. So really we traded some service of those that identify as white for other multi-race. That's what it mostly looked like from last year. When you look at how we compare to the community, we are underserving our Asian community, and then very slightly Native Hawaiian, other Pacific Islander, and other multi-race compared to those that identify that way in our community in the census data. So this is all helping to target our outreach efforts. A lot of our beneficiaries are from the rehab program, and it's word of mouth. It's in the neighborhood. They see what's happening next door and ask for it. So this is something we've been tracking long term to see if we can do a better job in serving our community. Moving to the affordable housing program, this is not something that we're required to report to HUD along with our CDBG data, but it is our opportunity to display to you what we've done in the last year on your program that you support generously each year. We put out a competitive funding cycle last spring, and we did receive a lot of applications. We ended up funding the In-Betweens Wesley townhomes. These are 11 townhomes, for-rent townhomes, that they're working with a local church to build on site. And that is in development review, and we gave them a low-interest loan for pre-development funds. The city-owned Adrian House. This is one of the city-owned properties located near Union Reservoir that we kind of did a pilot project in the last couple of years to rehab it and rent it out to a low-income household rather than at market rate. So we spent $163,000 this year, $222,000 in total renovating the home. It was over 100 years old. It did take a fair amount of work, and with rising construction costs, it did end up being more than we originally planned, but it is a loan. It would be paid back through rental proceeds. We have an agreement in place with the Longmont Housing Authority to rent the property, and it's rent ready, and they're just working with potential tenants right now to fill it. We also gave a loan to Thistle Community Housing for security improvements for about $39,000, and that work was completed in 2023. That's for their apartment complex up at 12th and Kimbark. We provided a loan for infrastructure construction to Habitat for the Rogers Road project out on East Rogers. Construction is underway, and that will be 9 for-sale units. We continue to give $300,000 per year through 2025 to pay back the Fleet Fund loan, which was used to construct public improvements around the 9 acres that the city bought as part of the Costco project. That is leveraging a lot of other funds as well, because we brought in the 7 acres and are planning to do the full 185 unit affordable attainable community there. And then finally, help the Village on Main as well with a loan. 2 projects we awarded last year, but were not spent in 2023. The Ascent at Hover Crossing, we awarded $1.8 million. That project was awarded LIHTC funding, and they expect to close on that financing in July and start construction, so that will be spent in 2024. Atwood Commons is another project that went in for LIHTC funding but was not successful in 23, so they're going to go in August 2024 and try again. So if they're successful, then those funds would be spent in 2025, so we're just holding them over. We completed the payment of fee offsets for 2 projects, for Chrisman 2 and for Habitat for Humanity's Mountain Brook project in 2023. So we had 7 projects awarded last year. These projects together will create 344 new permanently affordable units and preserve an additional 120, which is really a fantastic thing. And this is also really a result of the fee and lieu revenues coming in, and then council's ongoing commitment of the Affordable Housing Fund from the transfer from the general fund and marijuana tax revenues. But with those fee and lieux really coming in full force, we are able to do a lot more than in years past, which is really exciting. We collected $2.6 million of fee and lieu last year. A couple major accomplishments is we moved to a new cloud-based grant management program, and so we used that last year, and we currently have applications open right now as well for 2024's funding cycle. We continued the Planning Navigator contract. This is something that has been wildly successful in getting some of our smaller affordable housing developers swiftly and completely through the entitlement process and development review process here at the city, and it's something that is just been a big success. And then we completed the housing needs assessment and incentive study with Root Policy Research. So that is something that was grant funded, but the Affordable Housing Program front funds it until we get reimbursed. This is our first ever report on annual accomplishments for the Attainable Housing Program. In 2023, Council did dedicate $1 million to that fund. We did not do a competitive award process at the time. And 2024, Council dedicated $750. What we plan to do is bring a proposal for the use of those funds along with our 2024 action plan this year. So you'll see that come forward in about June with a plan for that fund going forward. So we do need to hold a public hearing for the CDBG funds. So I would ask that you would open that up. We did complete a public comment period. Today was the last day to submit comments. So after tonight, we will go ahead and update our annual report and submit it to HUD by the end of the week. If there's any questions, I'm happy to answer them.
Does council have any questions on this report? Seeing none, I will, Councilor Christ.
Molly, I'm going to ask a sideways question. We're talking about parking later on tonight, and you have facilities, affordable, supported areas like with the Recovery Cafe. How much parking do you think would be needed in situations like that?
So there is some data research out there showing that parking for permanently supportive housing is much lower than for traditional affordable housing and certainly market rate housing. The numbers are kind of all over the place, depending on where in the country, but some of them are as low as, what I think like 0.1 space per unit, but some of them are higher, maybe 0.6 per unit. So somewhere in there is what research shows nationwide is needed for permanently supportive. So those truly exiting homelessness, the very lowest incomes.
So you don't think there'll be more needed for staff or for resource clinicians to park when they come to those areas?
Certainly, they're having spaces available is helpful, but the report is showing, or the data out there does show that regardless of who is coming for what purpose, that almost all permanent supportive housing is overparked.
Okay, great, thanks.
Seeing no one else in the queue, I'll now open the public hearing on, what is this? On public hearing on the Consolidated Annual Performance Report. Is there anybody in the public that would like to speak to this report? Come on down. Greg. Greg Morrissey? I remembered.
Greg Morrissey, 1648 Harvard Street, yeah. Based on this report, how many people are we going to be taking care of?
1,320 people benefited from our CDBG funds this year.
Okay.
And then 344 future affordable housing units, so that many households.
That many housing users, because you talked about a public hearing. When was the public hearing? I didn't hear about it.
This is it.
This is it? Oh, this is the public hearing. Okay. Then any chance of me getting a copy of that presentation? I can study that, please?
Yep.
Is that okay with the city? I'd like to read through that, and then when you talked about where the public housing is going to go, the locations, they're all picked, it's all set?
For these ones, yes.
Yes, okay, good.
You can definitely have that report.
Good, thank you very much.
You're welcome, thanks, Greg. Is there anyone else? Gary Hodges.
Thanks, Gary Hodges, 2148 Stewart Street. Yeah, I just feel compelled, you know, the targeting by race at you know, trying to get assistance out is, I mean, it's weird. And what that's amounting to is something that's called equality of outcome, which is where you look at the percentages of the population and you say, well, this is what we have to match, and if we're not matching this, then we're doing something that is clearly, you know, racist or whatever word you want to describe it, and that's not the case. For example, you're Asians, right? I mean, you're underserving them, maybe for whatever reason, luck of the draw, or the people that happen to move here or whatever, they don't need the help. And if we're trying to get that group elevated so that we can match the outcome, there might be somebody else of another ethnicity that actually needs the assistance more. And so equality of outcome is, and it's really what equity boils down to, this equity pursuit, which is absolutely horrendous social policy. Anyway, I would just, I wanted to say something about that, and then I can't see how much time is left on that thing.
1:36.
Okay, so I went to the Longmont Economic Council. I saw Mayor Peck there a few weeks ago, and there was a housing talk. And the woman showed a lot of graphs and such. And what we saw was a real irrational behavior in the last few years because of COVID and such. And I think that's what's driving a lot of the housing market and such, and these efforts that are going forth, and it's causing a rational policy that we're going to return to a normal housing market. And you know, it was also mentioned that it's creating a barbell economy, right? You get a bunch of housing stock in the low end and the affordable end, and a bunch at the really expensive, and very little in the middle, which is where my daughter and husband, who are both public school teachers in St. Vrain, exist. And I don't know, it doesn't work. You just shift the burden from one group to another. Thank you.
Thank you, Gary. Would you like to address that percentages that Gary was talking about, or should we let it go? Well, if it isn't understandable as to why we're doing this, I think it's important that we make that statement.
Certainly. So it is challenging to know where to target our efforts to ensure that we're including our entire community without showing some level of data. Are we serving this segment of the community? Are we not? And so I agree that it's you know, showing that in a percentage, getting down to the 100% might be, it's a challenging way to do it, but it is one of our tools that we have when we are working with census data, which is our key source here. So the intent of this is to show council how close are we to representing our community in the services that we provide. Yes, are there certain factors that might make one group versus another desire to participate? Maybe, but can we focus our outreach efforts to make sure that we are doing our best to serve all segments of the community? That's our approach.
Yeah, I think the thing on this is that the primary qualifier is need.
Mm-hmm.
And so need is always going to drive who gets the funding. I think when they talk about this, what they're looking at is, it's not necessarily saying we need to hit certain targets, but what it's really informing us is, are there areas in our community that don't know about our programs, which we know is the case. When Molly talked about our housing rehab program, we know from going into neighborhoods that many people don't know about it, and it's word of mouth, and that's how they find out about it. So how are we communicating with the entire community about the programs that we have? And this is one measure of that.
Thank you. And for me, just looking at it, I never assumed it was anything more than not assuming that people do or don't need help, but that this is as many people that we are helping. regardless of the total number of people in that population area. It's just a report that we're helping this many people, which thank you very much for doing that. Seeing no, well, Counselor, no. Oh, okay. Seeing no one else in the public that wants to speak, I'll close public portion. And can I have a motion?
I move 10A.
Second.
So it's been moved by Councillor McCoy, second by Councillor Martin. But I am going to read what it says here, just for the public, because the city cannot move on the CDBG and home programs. They can't meet its obligations with HUD unless we okay this report, and that's why it came up. So we're not adopting it or anything. We're just saying you've reported it to us. So let's vote. That passes unanimously. Thank you. Thank you, Molly. So the next one on our list is a bill for an ordinance amending the Title 10, Chapter 1320, and creating a new Section 110 of the Longmont Municipal Code regarding penalties for public lands violations. And that is Ordinance 2024-19. Is there anyone on council that would like to address this ordinance? Seeing no one, I will open up the public hearing on Ordinance 2024-19. Is there anyone out there that would like to address this ordinance? Seeing no one, I'll close the public hearing on 2024-19 and ask for a motion.
I move ordinance 2024-19.
I'll second that. So the 2024-19 has been moved by Councilor McCoy and I seconded. Let's vote. And that passed 5 to 1 with Diane Christ in opposition and Councillor Hidalgo, nope, you're here. Councillor Yarbrough absent. We have one more. It is 2024-20. It's a bill for an ordinance amending Chapter 15.02.110 of the Longmont Municipal Code on public and common private improvement review, construction, and acceptance. Is there anyone on council that would like to address 2024-20? Seeing no one, I will open up the public hearing on 2024-20. Is there anyone on the public that would like to address this? Seeing no one, I will close the public hearing on 2024-20 and ask for a motion.
I'll move ordinance 2024-20.
Second.
It's moved by Councilor Rodriguez, seconded by Councilor Hidalgo Faring. Let's vote. That passes unanimously with 6 to 0 with Councilor Yarbrough absent. Our next bill is a bill for an ordinance amending Title 15, Chapter 15.04, Section 15.04.020, Table 4.1, Table of Allowed Uses of the Longmont Municipal Code on Animal Kennels. Is there anyone on council that would like to address this ordinance? Councilor Christ.
I do have a question in regards to this. This makes a distinction between grooming and boarding, and I noticed that in the primary employment area, would that include only grooming and not boarding? And thank you, Grant, for making the trek down here.
Good evening, Mayor, Council Member. So right now, boarding, grooming, training, all falls under the umbrella of Kennel. In the future, we very well may try to separate those out so that there is a differentiation between what is considered typical in this day and age as just dog daycare, pet daycare. But currently it falls under that broad umbrella of Kennel. Does that answer your question?
It does, but I saw something different on the table. Let's see, I'm in the wrong spot. It had a secondary use. Let me get to the table. Yeah. And I think I may have been in the correct one to begin with. Hold on. You had changed the schedule or the table of uses within, here we go, primary employment. And so as a permitted secondary use for kenneling, but it's a primary use in mixed multi-use and in agriculture. Is that correct?
That is correct. That's staff's recommendation. And the general intent, council member, is to limit that secondary use to no more than 50% of that area to preserve employment uses. Staff didn't have any expectation that that would be necessarily an issue just because kennels are typically relatively small. But that is also commensurate with some of the other uses that are secondary in terms of land use.
So there's a right of use, but they almost have to ask, or they can't exceed a certain amount? Is that?
It's still
that
the same
plan?
process in terms of permitting. It's just they couldn't exceed 50% of the overall area that's in that zoning district. So there would be a limitation if for some reason we get an influx of kennels in a certain area. But again, I highly doubt just in terms of the popularity or need for kennels that would happen.
Okay. Thank you.
You're welcome.
And welcome to the position.
Thank you.
So I have a question, so, and I thought that when this motion was made, it was only to put in, to change the code for daycare uses as a secondary use. And so, correct me if I'm wrong on that, but I do remember the motion, and this code obviously takes in the daycare and the animal kennels.
There
or
were
these two different ones?
There were two motions. One was related to the kennels, and the other one was related to childcare facilities.
Childcare.
There were some other issues related to the childcare permitting process and what else could be there. So that one they're still working on. So they brought this back because it's ready. They're still working on the other one.
So because this is going to be a permitted use now in multi-use, will there be is there the possibility that you could have an animal kennel next to a restaurant or next to a coffee shop or?
Yes, the current restrictions for kennels are primarily focused on separation from residential land uses. However, there isn't a current separation from other non-residential uses.
Okay.
But there are standards with respect to ensuring that things like noise, odor are addressed. So that would be part of the evaluation of that proposed use. So if there were concerns that were raised based upon the proximity, that would be something that staff would further evaluate.
Okay. All right. I just wanted to make people aware of that, that could happen. Seeing no other councilor comments, I will open up this public hearing on 2024-21. I'm sorry. I think Councilor Hidalgo Faring's comment was that, well, what about a cat cafe?
It opens up the
So it
door.
opens up. So I guess it doesn't really matter what I think about that. So, Is there anybody from the public that would like to address this ordinance? Seeing none, I'll close the public hearing and ask for a motion on 2024-21.
I'll move 2024-21. Second.
It's been moved by Councilor Hidalgo Faring, seconded by Councilor Martin. Let's vote. That passes 6-0 with Councilor Yarbrough absent. We have 2024-22. It's a bill for an ordinance conditionally approving the vacation of a 10-foot wide utility easement located at 121 Main Street. And we have Jennifer from the Planning Department here.
Good evening, members of the council. I will keep this brief. So this is a request to vacate a 10-foot wide utility easement at 121 Main Street, indicated by the red star on the map up here. This request is required for a mixed-use development that's currently under review for the site. The easement has never been used. All the utility providers agree that it can be vacated and is not needed. So in terms of the parcel, you'll see in the red box, the easement is within that red box, and essentially any development on this parcel that would be consistent with the mixed-use downtown zoning would most likely require vacation of this easement, given how it bisects the parcel. So with that, staff recommends that council approve the ordinance, finding that the easement vacation is in compliance with the code, and I'll stand by for any questions, and the applicant is also here for any questions.
Thank you, Jennifer. Are there any questions from councilors? Seeing none, I will open up public hearing on 2024-22. Seeing no one from the public that would like to address this ordinance, I will ask for a vote.
I move ordinance 2024-22. Seconded.
It's been moved by Councilor Rodriguez, seconded by Councilor McCoy. Let's vote. That passes 6-0 with Councilor Yarbrough absent. We are done with the second reading of ordinances, and we have no items removed for the consent agenda, so we'll move on to general business. The first one is the Boulder Regional Emergency Telephone Service Authority's potential 9/11 fee. We were going to have a staff presentation. Chief Artis is at the podium.
Mayor Peck, City Council members. All right, can you hear me now?
Yes.
All right, we'll try that again. Good evening, Mayor Peck, City Council members. Zach Artis, Public Safety Chief for the City of Longmont. I'm joined this evening by Christine Mason. She is the 911 Communications Director for the City of Longmont. We're both here on behalf of BRETSA, which is also known as the Boulder Regional Telephone Service Authority, to discuss a proposed 911 fee increase for 2025. So just wanted to cover really quickly, what is BRETSA? BRETSA was established under Colorado law in 1987 as a telephone authority. Its purpose was to use 911 fees that were collected by phone providers to then enhance 911 services across Boulder County. So if you're familiar with your cell phone or your landline bill, there will be a 911 fee on that bill. That is the money that is collected and then turned over to BRETSA to be used to enhance 911 services across Boulder County. Currently in Boulder County, there are 3 what we call 911 centers, or PSAPs. One is located here in the city of Longmont. Another one is located in the city of Boulder, along with Boulder County has their own communications center. The University of Colorado has one. It's typically referred to as a secondary communications center, simply due to its limited capability and then also this area that it provides service to, which is the students of CU. Currently there are 4, just the makeup of the board, there are 5 positions on the board. 4 of those positions are permanent, and Longmont is one of those 4 permanent positions because we have a PSAP, or a 911 center within the city. So what does the relationship between Longmont and BRETSA look like? So for the past 35 years, BRETSA has used 911 fees to fund staff members within dispatch centers, training, equipment, technology, and facility upgrades. If you've had the opportunity to come by Public Safety Building, S&J, and look at the upgrade that we received about a year ago, somewhere between the neighborhood of $300,000 to $400,000 that Brett's had paid for. It greatly expanded our operational space, along with upgrading consoles, computers, hardware, everything that we needed to. So if you have not had that, I would invite you to come by and see what Bretza dollars are being used for. This year, Bretza is estimated to fund about $1.7 million to Longmont itself. That comes in, again, the form of personnel, training, equipment, and technology that they give to us. So software costs, hardware costs, those types of things. So looking ahead, what is it that Bretza is trying to do, and why are we asking for this increase? So Bretza is looking to increase the current 911 fee from 75 cents to $1.25. That's a 50-cent increase. The last increase that Bretza got was in 2014, so almost 10 years ago. And the state average for a 911 fee, there's 57 telephone authorities similar to Bretza across the state of Colorado. The average fee is $1.91. Even with the increase, you can see that we're below the state average, but we also will put us in the bottom third across the state of Colorado as far as where our fee would sit. Why the increase? It's very simple. Bretza's like everyone else. We've seen an increase in software, hardware, and personnel over the past 10 years. On average, Bretza's budget changes anywhere between 5 to 9% a year, depending on whether or not we're negotiating new software, whether or not we're looking at hardware upgrades and installment, and again, personnel costs as those things change. So why we're here tonight is really looking for direction from City Council on how Longmont would like to move forward. And there really are two options for the City of Longmont. One option is to support the rate increase, which means staff at a later date would bring back the appropriate paperwork and agreement for council to vote on, and we would continue to maintain our status with Bretza. The second option is for council not to support the rate increase, meaning that Longmont would have to potentially create its own telephone authority. Longmont would then have to spend rough estimates of about $2.4 million to completely separate from Bretza as an organization, meaning we would have to separate our software and our hardware that we currently share with other communications center. Again, new contracts, new vendors that would be specific to Longmont. And one of the issues is we would have no redundancy. The way the current system is built at this time, meaning if our 911 center goes down here in Longmont, Boulder County or the city of Boulder, we're able to transfer our calls there immediately. They're able to start taking those emergency calls and dispatching our units to the appropriate locations until we can figure out whatever the issue may arise or the issue is. And then Longmont would have an ongoing cost of about $1.7 million to maintain the current software, hardware, and operational costs that we currently have. And so what we're seeking today is direction from City Council. I know there's probably quite a few questions, and so myself and Ms. Mason are available to answer any questions.
Thank you. Councilor Martin.
Thank you, Mayor Peck. What you did say, Chief Artis, is if we do not support this increase, and be aware, I have no intention of voting against supporting the increase. So, would we not incur other expenses if we didn't support the increase?
So what we've given you, what I gave you with the I think it was a 2.4, and then the $1.7 million are expenses that added those together that Longmont would now have to incur. So my math isn't great, but that's a little over, what, $4 million?
Yeah, so where would that money come from?
I have no idea.
Okay, so not supporting the increase doesn't seem like much of an option because we can't lose 911 service.
I think we'd have to institute our own fee.
Yeah,
which would be larger. That was my question. It sounded like the
Councilman
other.
Martin, what happens is if the other municipalities within Boulder County, along with Boulder County themselves, decide to move forward with the increased fee, but Longmont does not, that requires us to separate. We would have to then figure out how much we would get in 911 fees based on our population or the usage of cell phones or the ownership of cell phones within our geographical area. I can't give you that number. I can only speculate it would maybe be somewhere around 30% of what Bretza takes in now, which would probably be enough to cover the $1.7 million annually that we would need. There would not be enough to cover the $2.4 million to basically separate completely from Bretza. So operationally, we could come up with probably enough based on geographical and the cell phone usage, but the $2.4 million startup cost is where the city of Longmont would have to find it within its budget.
Has there been discussion of improving the quality of 911 service? I mean, sometimes we feel like you stay in the 911 queue a little long.
So, Ms. Mason, do you want to comment on that?
I'm sorry, I don't understand your question, Council Member Martin. We have on average an answer rate of 2 rings, which is less than 10 seconds.
Okay. We didn't really discuss that, but I think in questioning this at different times, we've said, you know, that 911 or dispatch, and frankly, I don't know where the distinction comes in, is sometimes overwhelmed when we have a high call rate.
So you will find that when we have a major incident go within the city, we do get inundated with multiple phone calls. So let's just take for an example, we have a shooting maybe at a major location. Everyone is going to call 911.
Mm-hmm.
So of course, that does, based on the number of operators that we have, you may experience some extended longevity in being able to talk to a dispatcher or an operator.
Yes.
We have made numerous enhancements with text to 911 and some other things to be able to communicate from the public.
Mm-hmm.
But typically what you will find on average, as Ms. Mason has said, is 2 rings and you're getting to talk to an individual. There are times, you are correct, that there are emergencies going on, that it may take a little bit longer to talk to an operator simply because of staffing.
And sometimes that is, you know, if there's something going on like street racing where a lot of people call, then not everybody gets to talk to a human.
So everyone will get a chance to talk to a human. They may just have to hold on to the line a little bit longer.
Okay.
Than someone who called first. It's kind of like a queue.
So my question is, if we support the rate increase, do we expect improvements in service to come with the upgrades?
Yes, ma'am. We expect improvements in hardware, software, and technology.
Mm-hmm.
Again, we are even working towards technology. I think the state has mandated to help identify GPS locations more accurately when there's a 911 phone call come in for an emergency when people can't speak. And so that technology is being implemented and some of that has already been implemented, but we are refining that technology. So yes, the fees are being used to enhance our communication centers to better serve our community.
All right, thank you very much.
Yes, ma'am.
Sorry. Councilor Hidalgo-Ferring.
Okay, thank you, Mayor. So, you know, really as I look at, you know, if we go option 2, which I'm not planning on, to not support the increase or keep with the current, we're not necessarily keeping with that current rate because there'll be other costs incurring for us to have to separate and offset as Bretza moves forward with advancing their technological, we'll have to create our own device. Is that accurate?
So I'm hoping I'm going to answer your question. If I don't,
Yeah.
please stop me.
No, that's fine.
So right now, all 911 centers share the same CAD system, so the same computer system.
Okay.
And so if we went in a different direction, again, that's a cost associated with us to go in a different direction, a different CAD system, different phone systems. All of those things right now, we use leveraging power to broker with companies to get a better rate based on the fact that it's being used by multiple folks. Again, I can't tell you until we go to the negotiations table to say our rate would actually be higher because we're a single entity versus being able to partner with the county and other cities to get this product at that.
Yeah, and I think, yeah, I mean, in the long term, in the long run, even though we'd have the points, you know, the 75-cent rate, long term, it would cost the city more.
In long term, the city of Longmont would have to eventually do a rate increase,
Yeah.
just simply based on inflation
Yeah.
that we see. So whether it's this year or 2 years, 3 years down the road, if you separated, Longmont would have to eventually increase
Yeah.
its rate in order to maintain the current status and the current 911 systems that we have.
Well, I was going to move to support, but it looks like somebody else is in the queue, so.
Councillor Christ.
Thank you, and thank you, Chief Artis, and Brett's a representative for being here. Normally, I oppose rate increases because I find them to be more difficult for those with lower income to adjust. You know, if you have $50 to spend and the rate goes up $5, that's a much bigger impact to a person's budget than if you have $100 extra to spend. But in this case, it's 50 cents more a month on a phone bill, and given the safety services that are received, I think it's a really good value. So I'm in favor of this.
Yes, ma'am.
I just wanted to say that. And I move that we accept or move forward, because to bring an okay. I move that we support the rate increase and that you bring more information forward. Thank you.
I don't really think I need to ask for a vote because everybody was talking at once. Seeing no one else in the queue, let's vote. Councillor Chris made the motion to accept the rate increase, and that was seconded by Councillor Martin. That passes 6-0 with Councillor Yarbrough absent. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mayor, Council.
The next thing on our agenda is a bill for an ordinance amending Chapter 15.05, Section 15.05.080 of the Longmont Municipal Code concerning off-street parking requirements, repealing and reenacting Table 15.05.0801, and amending Section 15.10.020.
Mayor, there is an item B.
Let's go ahead and do this one. We've got Ben Ortiz and the whole group is here, the team. I took them out of order.
Mayor, members of council, my name is Ben Ortiz. I'm a transportation planner in Planning Development Services. And tonight we're going to be looking at amendments to Chapter 1505.080, which is for off-street parking and loading. And we'll also be looking at one new additional definition in Chapter 15.10, which will include a new definition for affordable housing. So you may recall that back in February, February 6th to be precise, meeting of City Council, the Root Group presented several policy suggestions to further incentivize affordable housing, one of which included changes to parking for affordable housing. The Root Group recommended changing the parking code for affordable multi-family units to require a minimum of 1/2 space per dwelling unit, but in multifamily developments that included a mix of affordable and market rate units, the minimum parking requirement of 1/2 space per dwelling unit would apply to all units in the entire development. Planning staff met with the City of Longmont affordable housing staff, and using the Root Group's recommendations as a starting point, we came up with an alternative parking policy for affordable and market rate multifamily units, which I'll review in the next slide. So in addition to the changes to the parking policy for affordable housing, planning took the opportunity to make some additional changes to the parking code. Some are substantive, but the majority of the changes are cleanup items. And I'm going to go over the substantive ones, but all of the changes are listed in your council communication. So I'll discuss all the changes on this page line by line, and then I'll discuss the rationale for our approach to incentivize more affordable units through the changes in the parking policy. So up here, the very top line where it says parking requirement, and then you have spaces in red. So throughout the 1505-080, we have both requirements as well as allowances. And so because we have parking as well as allowances, the word requirement alone doesn't really make sense, and so we just changed that to parking spaces. So moving down, these three lines here represent the new numbers for affordable housing. The top one is for affordable housing multifamily, which is 0.5 parking spaces per dwelling unit, and that would be a minimum parking requirement. And then the next one down is affordable supportive housing, and there would be no requirement for that. And Molly did speak to that a little bit earlier in her presentation. The next one down is affordable housing non-multifamily and non-supportive, and that would be one per dwelling unit. And that's basically in line with what we presently have for affordable housing, is one parking space per dwelling unit. Now, we struck the word new out of co-housing because that's not new. It's been in there a while. And then everything else is the same except down at the dwelling multifamily. So presently, when we get a multifamily development, a market rate multifamily development, I should say, is we assign a parking ratio based on the number of bedrooms within each unit. And so for an efficiency or one bedroom, it's 1.75 spaces per unit. A two bedroom is 2 per unit. 3 bedroom, 2.25 per unit. 4 bedrooms and above is I think it's 3 there. Well, anyway, so what is being proposed, it would be 1 per unit. So as noted earlier, the root group did recommend 0.5 spaces per affordable unit in the multifamily developments, but that in a multifamily development that included a mixture of affordable and market rate units, the 1/2 parking space per unit would be applied across the entire development. So we feel that this recommendation from the root group, it would yield more land for more units, but not necessarily more affordable units. So what we chose to do was require a minimum of 0.5 spaces for affordable units, just like the root group policy recommended, and then 1 space for market rate units. And so our hope is that by tying the reduced parking requirement directly with the provision of affordable units on a 1-for-1 basis, this would lead to more affordable units being built. So other than the change to the minimum parking requirement for residential, the first substantive change is to the group living uses. And these include group care homes and facilities, independent living facilities, and rehabilitation and treatment facilities. And so for this land use category, we're proposing changing the minimum parking spaces required to a parking maximum allowance. So this kind of follows a citywide change made back in 2014 where minimum parking requirements for commercial development were replaced with parking maximums, and that was actually done to great success. So the group living category is one that was left out of the changes back in 2014, which is why we're including them with the changes now. And so we did consult with a local developer who builds the uses shown, and they stated that they're supportive of the proposed changes and noted that the ratios shown here would give the developer the flexibility needed to right-size the amount of parking that's provided. The next substantive change includes amendments to parking regulations for educational facilities. And so the first change includes changing the minimum parking requirements to maximum parking allowance, which is consistent with commercial development throughout Longmont. And the second, and then the remainder would be for the parking ratios. The second is for colleges and universities. We're proposing changing the minimum parking requirement of 1 space per 2 enrolled students to a maximum of 1 space per enrolled student. The third impacts public K through 12 schools. And so the city, really, we don't have any site planning authority for public schools. So it's up to the school district to determine the parking need. And so we made that change to reflect that the school district would be determining the amount of parking. The fourth is for private elementary and middle schools, which imposes a maximum of 3 spaces per classroom, which should accommodate the teacher, perhaps a teacher's aide or visiting parent and staff. For private schools, a maximum of 0.5 spaces per student at design capacity would be allowed. And then this ratio is based on the assumption that no 9th graders are driving, very few 10th graders would be driving, and a fraction of the 11th and 12th graders will be driving. And then the last change is for vocational or trade schools. Presently, it is the requirement is 1 per 2 enrolled students, and we're proposing that maximum allowance of 1 per enrolled student. So for vehicle fueling stations, we presently regard the area next to the pump as a parking space. But a person fueling their vehicle, they may or may not go into a convenience store to buy something, and some of the convenience store patrons don't buy fuel. And then if a customer is going to a sit-down restaurant, they park more long-term and won't leave their car next to the fuel pump. So for these reasons, we propose not counting the area next to the fuel pump as a parking space. And so to give you an example of what that looked like for convenience stores, we're proposing using the existing maximum for retail sales, which is 4 spaces per 1,000 square feet of building area. And for restaurants at filling stations, we propose an allowance of 12 spaces per 1,000 square feet of restaurant seating area. And this latter allocation is the same for sit-down restaurants listed elsewhere in the present code. Now the next one, which is at the very bottom, is for vehicle sales and rentals. So we're clarifying the allocation of 3 spaces per 1,000 square feet of floor area is for the building only, and the change would exclude the area dedicated to outdoor displays and storage areas in the parking allocation. And if you've been to a very large, car sales lot, you know that those new cars for sale can take up quite a bit of space. So the next change clarifies that for accessory uses, the allowed parking for the accessory use is in addition to the maximum required for the principal use. So in this accessory use example, and that shows another change we're proposing, 2 off-street parking spaces would be allowed for the accessory dwelling unit on top of the 2 parking spaces that would be required for the principal residential use. Presently, right now, for accessory dwelling units, what's required is 1 off-street parking space. So we're proposing to change that to an allowance of 2 spaces, so they can provide 2 spaces or 1 space. If there's plenty of street parking, then they could, in fact, park on the street. So this last change clarifies that the existing U.S. Department of Justice ADA standards are applicable, and that the planning director will be keeping a current copy of the standards in their office. This is to ensure that we're always applying the latest US DOJ accessible parking requirements. And so the language you see here is intended to replace the existing table on the next slide, which is presently out of date in only one way, but for nothing we've been reviewing lately. And so this table here shows the required number of ADA spaces, a function of the total amount of motor vehicle parking provided. And so we propose eliminating this table as noted in the previous slide, but we'll be creating a handout with the most up-to-date ADA requirements consistent with the DOJ standards that we'll keep for our own reference as well as to distribute to future developers. And so as noted earlier, the Affordable Housing Department recommended adding a new definition shown here called affordable supportive housing, which is defined as follows. Affordable supportive housing means residential units constructed that are strictly for individuals or families that are homeless or at risk of homelessness due to having an unstable permanent residence, location, or status, and where such units are paired with supportive services. And so you may recall in the parking table that there is no parking requirement for affordable supportive housing, but the developer, they may provide parking if they feel it is needed. So there wouldn't be any restriction from them providing parking if they felt like there would be a need for parking for staff or guests or tenants. Oops. Here we are. All right. Yeah, so planning staff, we met with emergency services to get their thoughts on the proposed changes, and they did have some concerns. And the first was that they found the language enclosed by the ellipse right up here to be somewhat confusing. And so this language clarifies that in the mixed-use corridor and the mixed-use downtown, a parking maximum was imposed for multifamily residential, but that everywhere else, a minimum parking requirement is still applicable. And so staff clarified to emergency services that parking maximums for multifamily residential, along with no minimums, is only applicable in the mixed-use corridor. And not all of you were here at the end of 2022, but that's when we brought up these changes to the City Council. And it was part of an implementation plan for the mixed-use corridor. And so then the other concern emergency services raised is that they believe that there may be a greater likelihood of people parking in fire lanes at or near a development they believe to be underparked. Presently, there are laws which forbid this practice, but greater enforcement may in fact be necessary to prevent this from happening in the future. So those conclude the more substantive changes. They're more beyond the slide, but they're not so substantive. They're the changes that there are additional changes that are more like grammatical corrections as well as clarifying language in the existing code. And I'd be happy to go through those. There's about 7 more slides to discuss those, or I'd be happy to answer your questions at this time. But all of those changes are listed in your council communication line by line.
Councillor Martin.
Yes, I just would like to understand, you have consistently through everything switched from defining space in terms of maxima rather than minima, except in the non-transit corridor downtown multifamily. And so my question, and this comes from constituents, is why? Why was it appropriate to keep minimums in that one special case?
Well, I think psychology is one good way of putting it. There are certain changes that people would have a great deal of difficulty with. We felt that the commercial was the low-hanging fruit because they're not necessarily within neighborhoods. And I think you saw one person here speak to a concern about not having enough parking in neighborhoods. But in the commercial, we and other communities throughout the entire country have had a propensity for overparking those types of developments. And all those costs do get passed on to either consumers. In the case of residential, it does get passed on to residences in the form of higher housing costs or higher rents. But for commercial, it made more sense to eliminate the minimum parking requirement. And so what we did to ensure that there would be enough of an allowance to meet the demand, we took that minimum parking requirement, we added 25%, made that the maximum, and we hadn't seen problems of there not being enough parking in commercial up to that point. So we felt fairly safe in doing that. And the reality is we've not really gotten any complaints that there hasn't been enough parking provided in commercial developments. The city also has what is called an alternative parking plan. And so a developer, if they feel like they need more parking than the maximum or less parking than the minimum, they can initiate this minimum parking plan and they can make their case why they feel like they can deviate from the parking requirements that we currently have. Sorry for that long-winded response.
Oh, well, I don't mind it being long-winded, but I think it was an answer to a different question than I asked. I was not objecting to the general philosophy of going to maximums for most planning metrics and permitting process, but rather, why have you kept this one exception of doing multifamily in residential neighborhoods that are not transit corridors or whatever, still in terms of minima? Why was that more appropriate than making it all consistent?
Sure, Councilmember Martin. So when we proposed the changes to the mixed-use corridor, which eliminated the minimum parking requirement for multifamily, we did ask whether or not there was some desire to move this policy forward with the rest of the city, and at that time, the direction we got was that there wasn't. At least that was our recollection.
No, I'm still not trying to go back and ask the question retroactively. I'm talking about I'm trying to think of a different way of stating it. Why, when you changed the current big change is about ordinary residential neighborhoods, multifamily, correct? Okay, and that is still stated in terms of minimums.
Right. Yes.
So what I'm asking is, why is it more appropriate to do that one in terms of minimums when maximums seem to be better in all the other situations?
Mayor and Councilmember Martin, I'll try to take this question on for you. My name is Phil Greenwald, Transportation Planning Manager with the city, and we'll just try to work through this as far as working with our teammates with the rest of the city. There was a desire to keep some parking minimums just because we had a lot of affordable housing being built outside of transit supportive areas. So the idea is that some of the folks living in our affordable housing will need a car, and that will still be car dependent. We're hoping that micro transit coming this summer will hopefully alleviate some of those issues, but notwithstanding, there are needs for parking in some areas, and so we kept the minimum for that reason.
Just because the feeling was that if it was a maximum that developers of affordable housing would choose to underpark? Was that the rationale? Because that's what I'm trying to get to is what were you thinking?
I think our idea initially when we first kind of set out on this, on maximums and minimums, was that commercial typically builds way more parking than they need.
Yeah.
And residential builds much less parking than they need. We have done studies since then that have proven otherwise, so we do feel comfortable with the one per unit for market rate, because that's what our studies. We actually had a graduate student do some areas around town and actually look at our city of Longmont for examples, and came up with that 1-to-1 ratio for market rate, and proved out that it was about half. We were overparked by twice as much parking as we needed for affordable housing. So we're comfortable with the half parking space per unit because we've seen that in examples around the city, and that would be the minimum. So setting that as a minimum floor gives some flexibility. And our idea is this is kind of our baby step into maybe getting to parking maximums in the next 5 years for everybody, and just doing that across the board. But this is kind of the first step. I think there's a comfort level that's not quite there yet within our team to change that. So we didn't want to take that to you.
So it was essentially conservatism as opposed to dogma. It's not a hard and fast rule.
Correct.
Okay, and I guess, I told the constituent that I felt like we had to, or I suspected that the intention was that as public transit gets better, then parking requirements will be reduced further. But
correct.
These apply to new buildings because you're not going to make people change.
Correct.
On the other hand, is it going to also in places that are already overparked? Is it going to allow places that are parking, Costco or Village at the Peaks? Is it going to allow things that are asphalt now to be repurposed into places?
As we often say, Councilmember, parking is a land use. So if we take away the minimum requirements, which we've done with all the commercial, that opens up some of that parking to be used in other ways.
So then, yes.
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Councillor Christ.
Thank you for such a considered effort on this project. Could someone define co-housing for me? It's on page 2 of the chart here.
Councilmember Christ, we will do our best job in pulling up those definitions as quickly as possible and get that information to you.
Oh, he's got it. Okay.
This is why I brought my book.
Okay, thanks, Ben.
Sure. Co-housing is defined as a residential development that combines individually owned dwelling units with smaller or partial kitchens and a larger community kitchen and dining room intended for communal use on a regular basis, and in which all residents agree to share in the provision of regular communal services such as cooking meals or providing childcare.
We have a few of those actually in town, don't we? Okay, so something that I've noticed is that parking changes during different stages of life. And on page 3, we're talking about group living. 3, and there's also a maximum there, 3 spaces per 4 beds, 2 per dwelling unit in independent living facilities. And I'm just going to pick on Boulder a little bit here. At Golden West, there's quite a few units there, and they felt they could give up a lot of their parking to apartments that were built around them. And what happened is there's a lot of home health care people that come and go, as well as staff for the facility. And so if you go to visit a resident there, you can find no parking. And the apartments have been very aggressive about maintaining their parking just for their residents, although, you know, they're built on the same land where that was originally parking for that facility. So I'm just wondering if we could be maybe, or consider being a little more generous with living facilities and group home care or group care homes and independent living facilities, because I do see a lot more parking related to people that need that kind of care to age in place.
Councilmember Christ, I did reach out to a local developer who has built quite a few of these developments over the course of many years, and they have a pretty substantial presence here in the community, and ran all these numbers by them. We went back and forth on these numbers quite a bit, and they were actually quite comfortable with what we wound up with. And so the numbers that are presented here give them enough cushion to provide to provide the amount of parking that they feel that they would need given the history of the developments that they have built in the past. So we feel pretty confident that these numbers are going to be adequate to meet these needs. And just to give you an example, an independent living facility, for example, would be also the same as, say, an age-restricted housing, 65 and older, that type of thing. One of the housing types that we had our graduate student look at was the equivalent of an age-restricted housing in the northwest part of town, and basically they had one parking space per unit, and they found that they were never more than 85% parked, and so they had a surplus even though they had provide less parking than what is shown here. And this is a part of town where there is no transit, where there really aren't any places to walk to. And so we feel pretty confident about these numbers.
I would agree that in Longmont, we seem to have enough parking at these types of facilities. But I'm concerned that someone might want to, remove their parking places, in which case I think we need to revisit it, because I have seen that problem in Boulder in more than one facility. Thank you for considering it. And on page 4, we have the public schools are determined by the school district, but we've set a standard for private schools. And I'm wondering if we couldn't, just for consistency, say permitted to most similar public school. I just feel like there's this, we're picking on the private schools versus the public.
Yeah, we can certainly make that change. We do have a history we have quite a few K through 12 schools in town, and I don't think it would be terribly difficult to find that information and get it from the school district.
Thank you. And then just one other thing about the ADUs on page 7. The 2 spaces are allowed but not required for accessory dwelling units. Is that correct? Yeah.
Correct. Those are a maximum. So that's just saying at the very most two per ADU, down to 0.
Yeah. Okay, great. I think that's a great improvement, because that has been in sometimes hard to create an accessory dwelling unit because of the minimum requirement.
So, Councilmember Chris, pardon me. I was just reminded that we would need council direction to make the change that you're requesting, and so if at the end you'd like to make that request.
Okay.
The formal request to make that changes regarding the schools and other changes.
Would you like me to make the motion, Jim?
Seeing no one else in the queue, yes, can you make the motion for the change first, and then to make the motion to accept?
Okay, I move that on page 4, the stipulation for private schools be changed to permitted to most similar public school, just for consistency.
Oh, I'll second it.
Thank you.
Councillor Chris made the motion to have consistency in the private and public school parking maximum limits. And I seconded that. So Councillor Hidalgo-Ferring?
With the school district, they're their own taxing district, their own separate entity. First of all, we don't have the standards of what they determine for parking. And then in the realm of private schools, not necessarily the charter schools that are under the school district, they would adhere to school district standards. But private schools are, they're under the city. They follow our city codes and ordinances, and So I feel that the private schools fall under any other like city business, a business in the city of Longmont. It falls under that category. So I view it not necessarily as picking on a private school, but really it operates as any other business in the city of Longmont. Whereas the school district is their own special taxing district, their own separate entity. So I would not be supporting this change.
Councilor Martin.
Yes, I have a question about what that would actually mean, because I understand that some people have a policy of thinking that private schools should be encouraged, but private schools can be very different. So there would not necessarily be a comparable among the bouquet of public schools that we had within our area. So a private school, for example, might be for students with particular mobility problems or something like that, and that would really change the land use requirements of the school. So I think without more study or maybe collaboration with the school district, that it's not necessarily appropriate to do that at this time.
Seeing no other counselors in the queue, let's vote on the amendment. And that fails with myself and Counselor Christ voting for, and Counselor Hidalgo-Ferring, Counselor McCoy, Counselor Martin, Counselor Rodriguez voting against, and Counselor Yarbrough absent. Yes? I'm sorry, I'm pulling it up to read it once again.
Make sure when they're making their suggestions.
So the council options, Councilor McCoy, were 1, 2, and 3. Which one did you choose? Okay. Okay. So Councilor McCoy made the motion to approve the proposed amendments to Chapter 15.05.080, parking, stacking, and loading, and Chapter 15.10.020, definitions as presented. Can I have a second? Seconded by Councilor Martin. Is there any discussion? Seeing none.
Point of order real quick.
Yes.
Just to clarify, this is a first reading or a zero reading? This is a zero reading.
Yes,
Right.
zero reading,
So
correct.
we're moving this to put on the
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Clarification. It's
Thank-
just a point of clarification.
No, thank you for that. We all needed to hear it. Let's vote. And that passes 6-0 with Counselor Yarbrough absent.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ben and Phil. We are going back to B. And this is a Quail Road annexation referral. It's a request for City Council to refer the 8902 Quail Road annexation into the annexation review process. So just for the public, it is not for us to approve the annexation. We're just moving it into the process.
Specifically approved concept plan, because that's what they, so it's like not considering concept plan.
Oh, thank you, yes. So even though there was a concept plan that was presented, we are not approving anything about the concept plan tonight. Jennifer, I'll hand it over to you.
Great, thank you so much, Mayor Peck. Jennifer Hewitt-Apperson, Principal Planner with Planning and Development Services. As the mayor noted, so this is a request for annexation referral for roughly 18.66 acres located at 8902 Quail Road. So annexation referral is the first step in the annexation process and does not constitute approval of the actual annexation or the concept plan. Rather, this referral directs staff to accept and process a formal application for annexation that would then be considered by the council at a later date. The formal application would include the detailed studies such as traffic that are required as part of the annexation application. Further, a neighborhood meeting will be required prior to formal submittal of this application for annexation. Thank you. I'll bring the mic closer. So just in terms of the area we're looking at, this subject property, it's part of a larger unincorporated Boulder County enclave, which is kind of hard to tell here, but these lighter gray parcels, this is an area of unincorporated Boulder County, and then what is representing around it is currently annexed into the city of Longmont. This general area is designated as mixed neighborhood, as in Envision Longmont, which allows for a variety of housing types and at densities ranging from 6 to 18 units per acre. So the property is eligible for annexation to the city of Longmont. It is within the Longmont planning area as defined by intergovernmental agreements with Boulder and Weld counties, and meets that statutory requirement that 1/6 of the property's perimeter be contiguous to the municipality. Additionally, our IGA with Boulder County, which I know we discussed a few meetings ago, does encourage the annexation of land within these county enclaves. So at this point, this plan is very conceptual and was really included more for informational purposes only. The exact road connections are still being worked out. Specific, access points are still being figured out. Traffic studies have not yet been reviewed by the city. Those would be part of the formal application. So the applicant is at this point proposing a townhome development of approximately 310 units, which is within the allowable density of the requested zoning district. And we are recommending that City Council direct the applicant to proceed with formal application for annexation. And with that, I'll stand by for any questions.
Do you have any questions from council? Councilor Martin.
Could you go back to the picture? Yeah. So I just want to reaffirm, since we did have a comment about that connection. Could we end up with something completely different? Because I'm never sure how much the concept plan that has to be submitted is a guideline. I know I often find myself telling people that entrances onto major thoroughfares are a good thing, not a bad thing, in terms of traffic safety and Vision Zero and all of that stuff. So I would just like a clarification of, are we going to end up with some connection that might not go right that way, or or is there no commitment to having an extra connection between Quail and Clover Basin at all, or what?
So at this point, to be determined, we will be reviewing the traffic studies and such. As you noted, it's, we typically like to see these cross connections, although I know there is some discussion as far as Quail Road, since that is a county road, so there's some intergovernmental coordination that would need to happen. I could foresee, it's not set in stone, that some of these access points might be emergency purposes, but again, our emergency services, our public safety folks still need to do their reviews. Our traffic engineers still need to review their traffic study. That would all be submitted as part of the application. And as this concept plan gets fleshed out through the development review committee process, it would become a little bit more refined, and that would be ultimately presented should you opt to refer this for annexation any refinements to that plan would be presented at the point of consideration for adoption.
Okay, so there's no commitment for access points now.
Correct.
But there could end up being a planning requirement imposed or an IGA requirement imposed.
Correct. We're just not quite there yet. We need to still,
Great.
we still need to do the work to get there.
All right, that's what I wanted to get said. Thank you, Jennifer.
You're welcome.
Councillor Christ.
So, Jennifer, the status of this property right now is it belongs to Boulder County?
No, it's privately held property. I was referring specifically to Quail Road being a county road.
Yeah, county road. So, is this part of a conservation group?
As far as this particular property?
Yes.
No, it is not.
It's not a conservation area.
This is currently unincorporated Boulder County. It's been used for agriculture over the years. It is within it's within the Longmont planning area, and it is designated for mixed neighborhood uses through the envisioned Longmont plan. But to my knowledge, there are not any conservation uses on the property.
Okay, I received a letter from an 11-year-old Longmonter. I just want to share her words. She says she lives in Longmont, close to beautiful McIntosh Lake, and I see a major problem in the surrounding cities and also Longmont. We are blessed to live in a beautiful state with gorgeous mountains. What I'm writing to you about is the rise in apartment buildings. Some apartments and other businesses were built on the east side of Hover, and I was a bumbling 5-year-old and didn't think much about it. Then 2 or 3 years ago, they sold the property on the west side of Hover, which used to be a beautiful field with an amazing backdrop of our mountains. Soon the field was cleared and the view disappeared. In Boulder, in the city, you feel like an ant. My solution, pause building for any apartments and wait for already built apartments to be occupied. She just taking the part that was important in there, and she finishes with peace and dinosaurs, and this is Yolizel Olvera. So, age 11 in Longmont. And I just remember, I know this is surrounded by development, but sometimes an open field and some open spaces are very important to the play activities of the children in that area, and that type of play leads to a lot of development, for young individuals. So I'm concerned about more density in that area where there is some open space that faces the mountains.
Okay, seeing no one else in the queue. So council wants two options. We can either refer this annexation or we can decline to refer it. So can I have a motion?
I move to refer for annexation.
Second.
It's been moved by Councillor Martin, seconded by Councillor Rodriguez, that we refer this property for annexation. Let's vote. That carries 5 to 1. 5 to 1. It's getting late. With Councillor Christ in opposition, Councillor Yarbrough absent.
Thank you.
Thank you, Jennifer. Now we're on the 4th of July follow-up presentation. I would like to invite Sandra Cedar to the podium.
Do you want me to start it? So Mayor Council, I'm going to actually start this one for you.
Okay.
And part of it's going to be a bit of a history and a recap, and then take you to the point where they can take it and answer some specific questions. So I think we started this progress based on a council motion particularly focused on community feedback about wanting to move the fireworks back to the Boulder County Fairgrounds. Council made a motion for us to bring that back. Part of the question is, why did it move from the fairgrounds to the Fox Hill area? And that actually was something that occurred during COVID when they were not issuing permits for these events at the Boulder County Fairgrounds. That was a decision they made at that time, and so the Kiwanis chose to move to Fox Hill. And since that time, decided to stay there. Obviously, we know that the fairgrounds are being reserved by somebody else once that date was given up. At the same time, in talking to the Kiwanis, we were finding that they were having challenges at the Fox Hill location. And so to be clear, part of that Fox Hill location is actually in Boulder County, and part of it is in the city. The golf course is in the county. One of the things that really changed the condition at changed that location's condition is that as that area was getting ready for development, there were roads there. And so when people were coming out, they were actually parking in that area. Today, we have a lot of homes there. And so, you know, bringing people in and parking in those neighborhoods was something that they were concerned about, and honestly something we were concerned about based on the impact to the neighborhoods that were being built and being occupied. In addition, one of the things so then we started talking about, so what are the options? The other thing that was front and center in our mind was really, what's the potential impact to neighborhoods and individuals that live in those areas? One of the things that we were seeing from the Fox Hill neighborhood is that we were getting a lot of feedback from that neighborhood as the fireworks were located there, and the impact into their neighborhood in terms of the number of folks that were coming in, parking there, and any number of issues. And I think you all received a number of those phone calls from people who live in that area. So that was something that we were trying to be mindful of. At the same time, you all know that we've received a lot of phone calls from members of the community, and that is specifically talking about the illegal fireworks that have been going off. And so one of the things we were thinking about there is, could we potentially come up with some type of event or something potentially to get people in to go to something else versus setting fireworks off in their neighborhood. And then operationally, some things that we were looking at was really, how do we not exacerbate the impact on our public safety staff, because we bring in as many people as we possibly can. And we also know the calls that we get during that event and where they're moving throughout the community based on the illegal fireworks. And so when we were thinking about different options, that was really kind of the framework that we were looking at in terms of doing that and working through these locations. In the council comm, there's a lot of different options for you. Council can obviously give us other direction should council choose to do that. I think the Kiwanis have made us aware that they could move back to Fox Hill if that were an option. We could look at potentially some other locations. I know there's some things that have been brought up. We've started preliminary conversations based on email requests that the mayor sent to me regarding the airport. I think it's a little bit more involved, and I'd be happy to go over the preliminary information that we've received from the FAA. I'm actually meeting with Joni and the FAA folks tomorrow, and so I was going to use the opportunity to chat with them about this as well.
Okay.
But so your options are, as listed, is you can do it at the location as it was described initially. You can do it at the location. You can move the event to Martin Street. You can have the fireworks at the Fire Training Center, but direct staff to look at moving the event further east, closer to downtown. You can choose not to do the fireworks at the Fire Training Center, which then the Kiwanis would move more than likely back to Fox Hill. You could have us look at other locations. And so we've given you all a lot of options. I just wanted you to know kind of what was in our mind, because neighborhood impact was pretty important in this one too.
Thank you for that that conversation on where we are and how we got here. So I am going to go through the council options one by one. And the first one is approve the 4th of July event as proposed in Martin Street, including bands, food, trucks, games, the drone show, and fireworks. So let's go.
Mayor, that's close. That's actually part of option 2 and part of option 1. Option 1 is just to go with the proposal that we gave last time. Oh, no, sorry, you're right, for Martin Street. Yeah, the whole party on Martin Street, a scaled back party on Martin Street, or no party on Martin Street and just have fireworks.
So,
sorry.
I'm going to take fireworks out of here because that's kind of a different, that's kind of a bit of a different discussion. Correct me if I'm wrong, but the fireworks aren't going to be on Martin Street. They're going to be at that may be where the fire training center is, but actually saying the fire training, the training center as well as the airport as well. Those are different options. As well as a third option, I am asking you to bring that back after your conversation with FAA. Because to make a decision on that tonight without hearing about what the FAA says, to me, is leaving out an important part of the research. So,
I mean, if you want to table it and then that gives us a chance to have the conversation with the FAA, that's fine.
well, the part I don't want to table, and I do want discussion from the rest of the council, is should we have the event on Martin Street, or should we look at a different
My answer would
place?
change depending on the FAA's answer.
That's true, yeah.
Mm.
Can have some.
The reason that I am asking is that, Harold, you and I actually talked about having the event closer to downtown in somewhat of the area of, and have the fireworks at a different part of town.
So
and that's why I wanted to divide them.
Yeah, so I think Jeff has had contact with some businesses downtown that are actually interested in participating in an event that's further north, actually north of the railroad tracks. I think that's going to be dependent on the answer with the FAA. If you want the fireworks at the airport or another location, then it may not make sense to have the event downtown. If the fireworks are in the southwest side, we may look at another venue for that.
Where's the drone show going to be if we go with the...
Well, we were looking at the drone show and the fireworks being done together, correct, Sandy?
Yes, when I contacted the St. Vrain Valley School District, the Drone Performance Academy, they said that they did not want to go on a different day. They really wanted to go as a precursor to the fireworks. So I would assume that wherever we have the fireworks is where they would also want to hold the drone show.
But it would be before the fireworks,
Yes,
right?
it would be before the fireworks, yes.
Okay.
Yeah, so they've agreed to do that. They're ready to set up planning meetings. I know we're trying to get contracts signed. The Kiwanis has already signed their contract for fireworks. So they're trying to figure out which location is the one for them. I would also mention that I think somebody talked about Dry Creek Park, and I did check with public safety staff. Too dry, yeah, not as
Flammable.
safe. Yeah, not as safe an area as the fire training center.
So could we tonight, I hate to table this whole thing. Could we decide tonight on whether we want to go with the student drone show?
I believe you've already decided
I
that
think
answer.
you've decided the drone show.
Okay.
The
I'm
question.
behind the times then. All right, let me call on other people. Councilor McCoy.
Thank you, Mayor Peck. I was not, thrilled with any of the locations, to be honest with you, and I think in these we have a formula for great community events on Main Street and in the surrounding streets around it, and we're constantly hearing little rumbles here, little rumbles there about how the economy is is in a recession, not in a recession, that sort of thing, and helping out some of our businesses as they, go through some of these turbulent times. So my initial thought was to look at doing something like we've done in the past, and have things downtown over near Roosevelt, where we have the skating pavilion for the orchestra or anything like that, in regards to the fact that we know that Thompson Park is being repaired and upgraded and everything, so that venue is not going to be in use this year no matter what. And so, maybe using Roosevelt for that, and then bringing in the food trucks and the other event type of activities. And I would even throw in another issue of maybe a 4th of July parade. It's very Americana, that sort of thing, that allow people to celebrate their patriotism and have different groups come forward and bands and things like that. And allow that to occur too in our normal sort of format of that the Kiwanis have done before. So my initial feeling is that I know that we've set things off from the Oddfellows building, we've set off fireworks from the top of Roosevelt building or in that general vicinity, and so my feeling is to keep it in that area there where we all, and I know that Harold was saying trying to keep it out of the neighborhoods, but it might be a little bit more scaled back, in the for the fireworks show. But if we have the drone show in there, and I think we're going to get to a point where we don't have as many fireworks shows in the future, and it'll be more drone shows as we see other communities going in that direction too, that maybe that would be beneficial to a whole lot of people that, and we haven't, we never really worry about the parking in that situation, because people will walk from the neighborhoods and park wherever they can to get to our events on Main Street. And I'm thinking that that's a formula that can't be beat. That's really our whole city image. We've had just great success with that. And then we shoot off the fireworks over Roosevelt or wherever. That would be my preference. But if the rest of the council would like to wait until we hear from the FAA, that's fine. I don't know how one area is going to be less dry than another area, but I don't know the logistics about that.
Well, and we may have to bring Michelle Goldman or some to talk about
we'll have to,
the fallout zone. And,
that's right.
and that.
The fireworks that you're referring to that we used to do as part of the Longmont Lights, the evening winter festival, much smaller show. So yeah, we'll have to consult with public safety staff on that.
Councillor Christ.
In your conversation with the FAA, could you talk to them about the drone show? I've received some communication about there's FAA rules about flying drones.
Yep.
And so I assume they would be flying at the training center or maybe at the innovation center, which you could, see from either direction, probably from Martin Street. So that is one reason to recommend Martin Street. And another reason, there's actually a lot of parking over there if you think about the hotel, the BioLife, a lot of these businesses would be happy to have more participation in a city event, because one of the things we hear in the north side of town is that it's always South Main and it never includes any other businesses. So it'd be kind of nice to have the noise also in a different part of town, take some relief from the neighborhoods that have had it all these years. And come in and talk to us about the noise of fireworks. And then something else that is that area of town near Martin has to recommend it is there are great bike trails to get to that area of town. Whereas when we go out to the airport, you pretty much have to drive. So those are my 2 cents.
So I'm going to make a motion that we table this until Till when, Harold? When
Well,
would be
I'm going to
your-
have the meeting tomorrow, and so I think we'll have a pretty good answer. There is some logistical pieces with fireworks at the airport that we need to understand to actually communicate to the airport, because have airports done this? Yes, but there's questions in terms of what was their land area, and so if we look at this, one of the things that they said is, if it requires a closure, and that's based on setup time, where they have to set up time, how they have to do it, this is not considered an aeronautical use. If you had, I think the thing they said is if you have a air show with fireworks, aeronautical use. And so how we look at the use of the land on that, because let's say theoretically you did it on the south side, but yet an aeronautical use, we have leasing requirements on the south side for aeronautical use as a jump zone. Aeronautical use gets priority, so setup time and those types of issues. And so understanding the nuances of that are a little bit, we need to talk to them, because it's the fact that it's a non-aeronautical use that's part of the challenge, and what that really means, and then depending on where it is, does it require closure? And all I know is we can't answer that question. The FAA is going to have to answer that question.
Okay, so we'll, I move to table the fireworks discussion until after you have the FAA discussion. Can I have a second?
Second.
It's been moved by myself and seconded by Councilor Hidalgo Ferring on tabling the fireworks discussion. Councilor Martin.
Thank you, Mayor Peck. At the FAA meeting, I wonder if it would be possible to suggest whether a drone show by students for educational purposes might make it into an aeronautical use. Just checking.
Yeah, we're going to ask all those questions.
Okay, thanks.
Seeing no other discussion in the queue, let's vote. That passes 6-0 with Councilor Yarbrough absent.
Mayor Peck, one thing I would also just point out is that the fireworks show is actually the Kiwanis' show.
Exactly.
So we'll need to consult with them too to see if they are interested in moving that to the airport as well. First of all, is it even possible? Second of all, are they interested in moving it to that? So I just wanted to mention that, and we'll bring all that information back next time.
And it is theoretical that we could say, here's an option, and this is what council's interested in. And they could go, well, we want to move back to Fox Hill. I mean,
Okay.
it is.
And I'm going to ask that when we have this on the agenda next, we put it up higher on the agenda so that people aren't staying
Absolutely.
here so late
Yeah.
just to talk about it. Okay, fantastic. Now it is Sandy Cedar's turn to tell us about the 2024 legislative bills recommended for City Council position.
Thank you, Mayor Peck, members of council. Sandy Cedar, Assistant City Manager. Today we have two bills for your consideration. The first one is a housing bill. It's House Bill 24-1316 concerning the creation of a pilot program for middle income housing tax credits. So even though right now we don't have any of these kinds of projects in the pipeline, we could in the future. Obviously, attainable housing is a goal of the City Council, and so we would certainly suggest that you support House Bill 1316.
Okay. Is there any discussion about House Bill 1316? If not, can I have a motion?
I move support House Bill 1316. Second.
It's been moved and seconded by Councilor Martin and Councilor Hidalgo Ferring to move to support House Bill
1316.
1316. Thank you. I'm trying to pull it up as we speak. Let's vote. That carries 6-1 with 6-0 with Councilor Yarbrough absent.
Okay, Mayor, the next one is Senate Bill 24-184, and this is concerning support for the development of surface transportation infrastructure and in connection. providing funding and operational flexibility needed to support the development of transit and rail infrastructure. So this is an extremely long bill that really changes kind of the face of what transit and transportation is going to look like in Colorado. It does create the high performance transportation enterprise and gives kind of what those powers look like. It does include some user fees for folks that are driving gas vehicles. And I think most importantly for Longmont is that it gives that permission for us to build rail in an intercity, in between cities, particularly including Fort Collins as part of the tract where the rail could be allowed. And of course, this is important because it allows us to be able to move forward and take advantage of some pretty significant federal grants. When I say we, I mean the state, to take advantage of those federal grants that would potentially allow for Front Range passenger rail to become a real possibility. So because of that, because making sure that this, which has been a priority for council, I believe, for decades, staff recommends that council supports Senate Bill 24-184.
I'll move that. So it's been moved and seconded by myself and Councillor McCoy. I do want to say that this is an exciting bill in that it really mandates the Northwest Corridor being built within 3 to 7 years instead of 20 more. So I will be testifying for this bill tomorrow, but there's going to be a lot of amendments, an awful lot of amendments. But at least we're on the same track. So Councillor Christ.
This is such an important piece of our transportation, and we've worked on this so long and been frustrated with RTD and fast tracks for so long that I just want more time to study it. So I will either not be supporting or just abstaining from the vote until I have time to really read all the text of it, because there will be changes.
Councillor Christ, we're not allowed to abstain. You either vote for or against the support of it. Good old Tom. Seeing no other comments, let's vote. And that carries 5-1 with Councillor Christ in opposition and Councillor Yarbrough absent. This will not be the first time we hear about this bill.
Yeah, I believe that's true, Mayor. And I do apologize. I realize I have my summaries right here. I did not get them to your desks today. That's why you're not seeing them. So my apologies. Thanks, Mayor.
That is it for our bills. Okay. Now we have final call, public invited to be heard. Do we have anybody in the public? Yes, thank you for waiting. I appreciate that.
Oh, you want to turn it on?
That one. Red. Okay. Thank you, Mayor Peck. Thank you, Council, for staying here so late this evening to entertain my conversation. So my name is David Kimmett. I reside at 9536 Schlegel Street. So I'm within the Schlegel neighborhood that is adjacent to the annexation concept that you referred to just a few minutes ago. Not necessarily opposed to the annexation, just the format of the concept. The Schlegel neighborhood, if you're familiar with it, is comprised of two very long north-south axis streets, Schlegel Street and 89th Street, both of which have ingress and egress off of Nelson Road. They are not designed by any means to be collector streets, nor is Quail, which is the south side. So if you can picture it, there's Schlegel, 89th, Quail.
Okay.
Quail at one time, the right-of-way does extend through to Airport Road, but it's been blocked by some intergovernmental agreement between the city of Longmont and Boulder County in years past. If you go that way, as a driver, you'll find you'll have to turn around, but as a pedestrian, it has pedestrian passage. So it's not even for emergency services vehicles. There's a fence and cactus, and it's basically impossible to get through. This proposal, I'm not sure who designed the concept, but the concept doesn't take into consideration that blockage at the west end of Quail. I think it contemplates utilizing 2 points of ingress and egress on Quail, which is a 30-foot right-of-way and a 25-foot or 20-foot wide strip of asphalt, and use that as a access to airport, which it is by no means designed to do. The other fear would be is that once Quail is opened, the whole rationale for closing Quail at some time in the past, it's the west, I think it's called Westbrook Village is the neighborhood on Quail, Box Elder, and Airport Road, was to prevent drivers from cutting through 89th or Schlegel to get to Nelson quickly and avoid the light at Airport and Nelson. The streets, all of the streets were designed in the early 1960s, do not have stormwater, do not have the proper width in order to enable the sort of access that 310 units of townhomes would engender. And of import, and I believe Gracie mentioned it, is that there's a lot of pedestrians that use our neighborhood either to walk on the quiet streets or it's a safe routes to school on the Dry Creek Greenway. Essentially, we'd be setting up a death trap if 89th became a thoroughfare. It would turn from less than a local road, basically, into a collector. And at the collector level of service for rights of way, it is not prepared. Thank you.
Thank you, David.
Yeah.
Is there anyone else in? Yes, come on down.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. Hi, my name's Chris Allred. I'm a resident of Longmont. And I just wanted to share a very quick concern about the legislation that you mentioned, SB 24-184. I think it's a great idea to be building a railroad. I've just done a lot of advocacy around Rocky Flats. And I've noticed here recently that it's not a very detailed map, but I see that there's a portion of the railroad going out towards Winter Park, Steamboat, and Craig. And by this undetailed map, it looks like it goes right through north of Arvada. And I'm wondering if that's planned to go up Coal Creek Canyon. If so, that might go right through contaminated land downwind of Rocky Flats. So I just ask that the supporters of this bill be aware of that there's been a lot of public engagement around mountain bike trails or private toll roads that also go through that contaminated area, and I just want to make sure that this gets onto the bill's supporters' radar early on so that it doesn't become a fight down the road, that we already have this great legislation for a railroad and public transport, but it's going through contaminated land and causing more public health concerns. So just wanted to bring that up early, and thank you for your time.
That's a very good point. And to council, this bill, if you haven't read the bill, it is not just about the Front Range Passenger Rail District. It is also about the railroad that they're building in Craig from Winter Park, and to get us to the mountains easier, faster. So that was a good point. Thank you. Is there anybody else in the chamber that would like to address council? Steve, come on down.
Good evening, Steve Altschiller, 1555 Taylor Drive. It was pointed out to me that when I was up here earlier speaking, I had kind of a Biden brain moment.
I noticed that. I liked it.
I would like to clarify that it was not President Trump that flew in 320,000 people without going through border checkpoints. It was President Biden. He's admitted to it, but he refuses to point out the 43 different airports that they've been sneaking them into in the late of night. So I was starting to talk a little bit about supply and demand. And I've pointed out before that there's probably in the neighborhood of 6,500 illegals living in Longmont. And I know this is not possible, but theoretically, if they were not here, even if you have 6 people per unit, you would all of a sudden have 1,000 empty units in Longmont. That would probably bring rents down 10, 15, maybe even 20% because of supply and demand. The landlords would have more trouble filling the unit. They would bring the price down. So you're spending all this time and energy and money building low-income housing. And like I said, I know this is not feasible, but realize that there is a cost to having lots of illegals in your city, whatever city that is. The other side of the coin is wages. They have jobs. And if there are fewer people looking for jobs, the employers would have to pay more. So again, my point is there is a cost to having them here that is affecting everybody in this city over and above the potential for crime. And as I've talked about sanctuary cities, then you go the next step, and if they commit a crime, they are released right back into the community. They're not turned over to ICE. So I wanted to point out that side of the function of life also. When they were talking earlier about housing and a half of a parking space per unit, or when you had houses with 2-bedroom, 3-bedroom, 4-bedroom, there might be 1 or 2 spaces per unit. My question is that nobody brought up, if you have a 10-unit housing with half a unit, half a car space per unit, that'd be 5 spaces. What if one person owned 3 cars? Are the housing people that place people in units going to say, no, you can't have more than 1 car?
Mm-hmm.
Or what if you move in with 1 car and then you buy 2 more? Are they going to be told they have to sell a car? Is somebody going to be monitoring to see if people use excessively more than their half a space or 1 space or 2 spaces?
Thank you,
And
Steve.
that was never covered. Thank you.
So now we are ahead. Is there anybody else? Gary?
Yeah, thank you. 2148 Stewart Street, Gary Hodges. So fireworks, yes, on a 4th of July display. We used to go to those all the time with our kids, and they were always just massively attended. So I think there's obviously a need for it, you know, but I mean, our dog hates fireworks, so I mean, I'm compassionate to those like that, and poor Lucy. I mean, I get it, but it is 4th of July. It's one night of disruption. If we could just get people from doing them, you know, for weeks afterward, that would be great. I would just say it's one night of disruption. Just pick the place with the most parking, the most access, so the most people can go, and just go with that. So council meetings are really interesting, right? Listening to the public invited to be heard. And I think we get it, at least what I observe is skewed presenters on opinions and such. And so I ran for council, and I have the opportunity, and I still talk to lots of people about it, and you know, housing, apartments and stuff. And I read Nextdoor, I read Voice of Longmont. There's a lot of displeasure with the type of development that's happening in Longmont lately. And you know, if you were to only be here, you would think everybody hates single family housing, and all anybody wants is, you know, high density housing. And I don't think that's correct. I think without question, I mean, I would wager a big thick stake with anybody that the vast majority of people are not supportive of that in the city. And my daughter, her friends, they're late 20s, early 30s. You know, I know a lot of people with children, and they want single family homes. That is by far what I hear. If affordable, you know, kind of what we would call starter homes in the past. And to just be going, you know, envision Longmont and, you know, rezoning, and, you know, it's like every new place has townhouses, and, I don't know. I don't think it's what the majority of the city wants. I mean, I understand the motivations and the sincerity behind it, but can we have some of these infills be some starter families instead of all of them? You know, I mean, everything that everybody's seeing, and people are really raging on Nextdoor and Voice of Longmont, and again, people I know, now I'm repeating myself. Thank you very much, and thanks. This is a long meeting, and thanks for you know, having me 3 times up here.
Thanks, Gary. So we are now at council comments. Anyone need to comment again? Seeing no one, city manager. Oh, Thank you, Rachel. Come on up, Lance.
Lance Whitaker, 1750 Collier Street. I'd just like to leave you with a feel-good story today. I have a new friend named Terry. He's a veteran. He came over to my house the other day, and he was quite adamant, and he asked, are you the guy who flies the flag on the front of his house? And I said, yes. And he goes, how come you're not flying it no more? And I says, well, because I usually get them from storage units. And I haven't been doing that over the pandemic. So he said he was bidding on a flag, and that if he got it, he was going to give it to me. And nothing felt better than hearing from a veteran that I made a difference. And to get that flag was special, was real special. So tomorrow, being National Giving Day, I ask everybody to give a little more in the name of Kenny. Thank you.
Thank you. City manager comments.
No comments, Mayor, Council.
I don't see a city attorney here, so we will. Oh, Jamie? No comments. Thank you. Thank you.
Second.
It has been moved and seconded that we adjourn. All those in favor? All those opposed? Good night. This is ridiculous. Let's just pick a place and have the damn fireworks. That's the name. They don't care about the people, and that's what I told Ruby. I said, you're very television. You're not caring about people. You're caring about dry grass and birds. And I said, that's not my job.
Yeah, what'd she say?
Nothing. She just stared at me. And she kept going back to the Dickens Park, and I finally, she had the council come there, and I finally slapped her. We're done with this. It's not going to be at Dickens Park.
Kiwanis is going to do what Kiwanis is going to do, with or without us. The purpose of having an event is so that people are not doing fireworks in their neighborhoods. Driving by there.
Good point.
Oh my gosh. Yeah. But, it was a long one today.
But we listened politely.
Yes.